Chapter 1542. The war between Britain and France lasted more than 100 years. The Night Watcher had experienced it, too. But as a king from a more ancient era, he wasn't interested in the killing between human races. If he remembered correctly, he happened to be in the Far East during that time. On the one hand, he was avoiding the war, and on the other hand, he was looking for the legendary elixir of immortality in the Far East. But he had the right to immortality because he made a wish to the magic lamp. Then what about Siejatu? Of course, he didn't make a wish to the magic lamp. How did he achieve immortality? At this time, even though the Night Watcher was not interested in what Siejatu wanted to do behind the scenes, he was a little moved by the fact that Siejatu could live until now. "You've been alive for such a long time." The Night Watcher shook his head. "In fact, 100 years is enough for a person to forget a lot of things. As for hundreds of years, even hatred would have decayed long ago. But you still seem to be persistent. Let me tell you a story." High Priest Siejatu waved his hand at this time. On the metal wall behind him, a dozen lattices suddenly cracked open. From these lattices, washbasin-sized drones slowly flew out. Through the transparent tempered glass wall, they projected laser beams. The moment the beams converged, some images unfolded in front of the Night Watcher. A quiet mountain village slowly unfolded in front of the Night Watcher. The High Priest's voice also sounded at this time. "This is the place where I was born. It is recorded in a peaceful town in the Farin's kingdom. As you know, I was born in the era of war." Suddenly, flames soared into the sky, and the quiet town was dyed red. The flames of war began to devour all the houses, roads, and people here. In the midst of the ruins, a 10-year-old child was carrying a little girl younger than him at this time, walking with difficulty on the charred streets of the town. The child was barefoot. His feet had long been burned by the scorching earth. Finally, he couldn't hold on any longer and then fell to the ground. "This is me." The High Priest pointed at the child who fell on the ground and said slowly, "Do you feel it?" The Night Watcher said indifferently, "It's quite pitiful. But since he lived in the era of war, obviously he's not the only one who encountered tragic things." "I guessed you would say that." The High Priest smiled and looked at the child in the image. "Obviously, I didn't have such thoughts at the time. For a child who had lost all his family members, his only thought at that time was hatred for the entire world." The Night Watchman glanced at the High Priest. "Now? There's nothing wrong with it," the High Priest calmly said. "The progress of human civilization has always been accompanied by the flames of war and blood. This unfortunate occurrence can only be attributed to the fact that I didn't have the ability to protect my family. In fact, I could have died at any time. Therefore, all of my anger and hatred at that time lost to incompetent rage." The Night Watcher said indifferently, "Don't you think your point of view is too harsh for this child? He needs to recognize this fact." The High Priest smiled and said, "Let's be clear about one thing. Even if he treats life gently, life won't pity him." "So?" The Night Watcher frowned. "Are you going to take revenge on life, on the world?" The High Priest shook his head. "As I said, there's nothing wrong with it. At that time, I was so insignificant, so I had hatred. But now, I obviously don't. As long as I want to, I have the ability to change the entire world." The Night Watcher immediately sneered. "With this place? Oh, or rather, with your method of copying humans? I call it those scales of good and evil." The High Priest said slowly, "I didn't copy anyone. I just split the good and evil in people." "Scales of good and evil?" The Night Watcher frowned as if he vaguely thought of something. "You mean, Ma'ats? Scales of good and evil?" The High Priest smiled and said, "I think you'll think of it immediately. After all, it's the king of the 7th dynasty. But unfortunately, it's still somewhat different from the legendary Ma'at scales of good and evil that you know." The Night Watcher looked at the drones in confusion. At this time, the drones began to change to another set of images. In the image, a young man appeared. His appearance was similar to the little boy in the flames of war. His face was also very similar to the face of the high priest standing in front of him. This was the young Siegetu. The young Siegetu was now in a desert, an oasis, where the oasis temple was located. I found this Libra here. The high priest's voice echoed in the empty room. I came into contact with it, and it completely split my good and evil. Then, I became two, and at the same time, my soul obtained eternal life. The night watcher frowned deeper. He was trying to understand the high priest's words with what he had seen and heard in his long life, to determine the truth of this matter. Who is the person standing here now? The night watcher suddenly asked. If I say I'm good, would you believe me? The high priest smiled at this time and said, You may assume that I'm not the good one, but the evil one pretending to be the one. So, it doesn't matter which one I am. What matters is why I'm telling you this. The night watcher raised his eyebrows. The high priest spread his hands and said, I'm doing a great experiment. I want to invite you to complete this experiment with me. In a long time, only you are the most special human I've met. You have a long life, a wealth of knowledge, and a strong body. You can be the best assistant for this long experiment. Of course, this decision was made when you received the invitation letter to explore the Oasis Temple and I discovered your secret. Don't you think this is a matter of fate? At first, I just wanted some outstanding scholars, but I didn't expect you to be among them. The night watcher shook his head. Apparently, he was quite helpless about this matter. But what the high priest said made some of the things he couldn't figure out before become connected. As early as half a year ago, after he received a mysterious invitation letter from an investor, he had a vague feeling of uneasiness in his heart. But he had been searching for the mysterious power for a purpose in his heart. Half a year ago, an entire team of archaeologists finally arrived at the Oasis Temple after several trials and tribulations. This temple had never appeared in the text of human history. They almost went crazy and rushed into the temple. This was the beginning of all of this. When the night watcher thought of this, he suddenly turned around and looked at Ibn, who was hiding behind the door and peeking out sneakily. Those scholars who entered the temple before were just like Ibn now. They had forgotten everything and became puppet-like. They had been deep in the temple and had been engaged in all kinds of research. Even Ibn himself had been replicated by the high priest in a strange way. But in the end, he was special. A human who had no special ability other than immortality. His rich knowledge and experience allowed him to escape. Since then, he had been hiding in the Sun City, quietly waiting for the opportunity. Ibn or Arya, because he had no knowledge, after losing his memory, he was thrown into the Sun City to fend for himself. The entire Sun City was actually under the High Priest's surveillance. Every place in the Sun City was equipped with surveillance cameras, and there were even drones disguised as birds in the sky. The entire City of the Sun was like a huge experimental field. Except for the High Priest himself, everyone living here was probably a part of his experiment. After thinking this through, the Night Watcher, the real Mr. Otto, naturally, was not unmoved. He even began to be surprised by the High Priest's actions. As a human who had also obtained immortality, compared to what the High Priest Siegetu had done, Mr. Otto suddenly realized that he was really like a salted fish. What is the experiment you speak of? After a long silence, the Night Watcher finally went straight to the topic. After living for a long time, he was old. Most of the time, he was not willing to understand the process of things. I found that there is a soul in this magical scale. High Priest Siegetu's eyes were faintly fervent at this time. I can feel the power of this soul in the scale. It is the master of the scale. It has power that humans cannot imagine. But it is incomplete, so it has been in a dormant state. I want to mend this incomplete soul. Mend the soul? The Night Watcher was slightly surprised. Since ancient times, whether it was the West, ancient Egypt, or the Far East, the theory of the soul was a huge mystery that could not be solved. How? The night watcher couldn't help but ask directly, even though he looked so stupid when he asked the question. He even felt that he was stupid, but he still couldn't resist the desire for knowledge in his heart. After such a long time, his knowledge was so rich that it could overshadow the best scholars in the world. Even so, there were still many things in the world that he couldn't solve. Obviously, the theory of the soul was one of them. If he could mend the soul, if he could right the soul, revive her. The night watcher's eyes were like that of a wild beast. This kind of look was very aggressive. The high priest seemed to feel the obsession in the real Mr. Otto's eyes. He couldn't help but frown. Otto, it seems that you have more stories than I know now. I'm getting more and more interested in you. Cut the crap. Just tell me, how do you plan to mend an incomplete soul? The night watcher Otto asked in a deep voice. The high priest said seriously, it's very simple. You just need to create a perfect shell as the residence of this incomplete soul. This shell is enough to make up for the missing part of the soul. When this perfect shell is completed, it will be the time for the missing soul to awaken. The night watcher couldn't help but frown. He was thinking about what the high priest said. The eagerness in his eyes gradually cooled down. He shook his head. I don't know how you came up with this idea, or where you got the inspiration from, but I don't think this method is feasible. The high priest frowned. The night watcher said indifferently, in the Far East, there's a saying called reincarnation in another body. The general meaning is that a dead soul attaches itself to the body of another dead person, and then the other dead person is resurrected. The question is, who is this resurrected person? The high priest said without thinking, his soul is the first to die, and his thoughts are also the first to die. I think, therefore I am. Naturally, he is the first. No matter how the appearance changes, only the inside remains the same. The night watcher looked deeply at the high priest. Then, in the years to come, the first person can only live as the second person. Because he had the appearance of the second person, and he had all the blood relations that belonged to the second person. So, tell me, which one is he? He knows. The high priest snorted. Only he knows. The night watcher shook his head and casually looked at the high priest. You won't know either. You're wrong. The high priest smiled and said, what I care about is not which one it is. The important thing is the experiment itself. If it can be revived, it can prove that my method is not wrong. This will be the greatest discovery of mankind so far. But that's not what I need. The night watcher shook his head. What I need is a confirmed, true, and only soul. He and the high priest looked at each other in a confrontation. After a long time, the high priest sighed. I will always make a last effort, but it is often in vain. Otto, I hope you can understand me. The night watcher did not say anything. The good conversation was almost over. He focused and tensed up. Then, he raised the carbon fiber black knife in his hand. He was afraid that he would not have a good time after this. Usually, there was only one result left at this time. Don't worry, I never kill people. The high priest shook his head. I hate to let a life disappear, but you will not know who you are for a long time. You will also become the nutrients for the growth of this shell. After saying that, the high priest clapped his hands. The metal walls around them suddenly cracked open piece by piece. White-robed guards slowly walked out from the cracks in the walls. They approached Aotoa step by step. At the same time, their bodies started to change strangely. It was as if something was going to break out of their bodies. Chapter 1543. Even so, a night watcher, Otto didn't panic. He carefully observed these white-robed guards who were mutating. But Eben was already scared out of his wits. He wanted to run away, but he couldn't move his legs. Something seemed to be forcing him to stay here, even if his rationality told him that even if his legs couldn't move, he should be able to crawl away. As he got closer, these white-robed guards who had mutated into monsters. 1, 2, 3, 8. A total of 8 monsters with the body of a demon beast surrounded Night Watcher, Otto. I know your background, Otto. At this time, the high priest was hiding behind the completely strengthened glass wall. He said calmly, "You have a long life, but in fact, the speed of your aging is much slower than that of ordinary people. You are not easy to be infected by the virus, and your self-healing ability is also stronger than ordinary people. Other than that, your body's attributes are not much higher than ordinary people. These monsters are enough to defeat you." Night Watcher suddenly said, "No wonder you said that the residents living in Sun City are all part of your experiment. It seems that the entire Sun City itself is a natural cage, and the monsters in the desert are the best walls. Those monsters outside are also released by you, right? Because of your cleverness, I can really explain a lot less." The high priest smiled. "But obviously, now is not the time for you to continue deciphering. You should seriously think about how to survive in this desperate situation. Struggle. What will a special human like you do when faced with a desperate situation? This is really a rare set of materials." "What a bad guy," Night Watcher muttered. But he had to admit that what the high priest said was true. He really needed to deal with the crisis in front of him because what the high priest said was true. His situation was indeed like that. Except for being able to live a little longer, he couldn't surpass the limits of human beings. He didn't have very powerful strength. Night Watcher sorted out his thoughts and soon became fully focused. He held the black carbon fiber saber in his hand with both hands, then bent his legs slightly and lowered the saber in front of him. One of the 8 mutated monsters seemed to be unable to hold back its ferocious nature and was the first to charge at the Night Watcher. He calmly used the black sword in his hand to block the attack, but the monster's strength was too great. With just a simple contact, the Night Watcher could not help but step back. However, he was obviously not injured. Black Blade had protected him very well. He had only lost to this monster in terms of strength. The high priest looked at this scene in surprise, then nodded slightly and said, "As expected of an immortal human, rich combat experience can indeed make up for a part of the gap in strength. But I don't know how long you can maintain your advantage in the face of absolute strength." The Night Watcher glanced at the Grand Priest and took a deep breath. Then, he jumped up and raised his black sword with both hands. He slashed at the first monster that attacked him. The monster's attack was rather simple. It simply charged forward, using its body's instincts. Its defense was even simpler, probably because it was confident in its body's strength. Because it had strong scales, facing the Night Watcher's attack, the monster just waved the back of its hand to block it. However, there seemed to be a flash of black light. This monster that showed its ferocious nature first had its arm broken in an instant. Not only that, there was a terrifying wound on its chest. The sharp carbon fiber saber not only cut off its arm but also left a terrifying wound on its body. The Night Watcher did not stop. Taking advantage of this gap, the saber rushed forward and pierced into the monster's throat. Then, it dragged up and directly cut open the monster's head. Fell. Just like this, a white-robed guard that had mutated into a monster easily fell to the ground. The Grand Priest frowned as he watched this scene. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes, but he did not panic. "Otto, you are indeed very special. This is the power of a huge amount of experience. It is indeed extraordinary." "Experience?" The Night Watcher shook his head at this moment. "Perhaps you think that in this strange space where Sun City is located, there is already the most mysterious secret in the entire world. But in the end, after you found a lake, you thought it was related to the sea. Siejatu, you should go out more and not limit yourself to this small Sun City. In the distant Far East, there is a race called Xianyuan. Every warrior among them has powerful strength far beyond that of humans. The strong among them can even make the sea churn and shatter mountains with one punch. I just used some skills of this race just now. Of course, he only knew this little bit of skill, and he had secretly learned some superficial knowledge. But he naturally wouldn't explain it in detail. Siegetu shouldn't know, even if he must have gotten information from his clone again and again. He only remembered that when he traveled to the Far East, he inadvertently entered a terrifying battlefield and saw the spectacular scene when the race called Xianyuan fought against the monsters from the sea. Back then, by chance, he had saved a warrior of this race. Later on, this warrior had taught him some special skills, but at the same time, he had to abide by an oath that he could not teach others. This oath seemed to have some kind of magical power, with a strange binding force, so he had been passively guarding the training method of these skills, unable to teach others. Xianyuan? The Grand Priest frowned. He was also a professor who studied the occult outside. Although he did not live as long as Otto, more than 600 years was extremely long. You are talking about the ancient legends of the eastern countries. That is just a legend made up by the people of that country. I have also studied the history of ancient Huaxia, Otto. You're just lucky enough to find this oasis temple, that's all. The night watcher, Otto sneered. After living for thousands of years, his temper had been fluctuating between good and bad. Now that his temper had changed, he retorted without thinking. A frog at the bottom of the well who dares to touch the study of the soul. Go back and read more basic books. Then let me see how powerful this so-called technique is. I am also very willing to see more civilizations. The Grand Priest waved his hand, and the 7 monsters instantly attacked the night watcher. At the same time, more white-robed guards walked out from the cracks in the walls. The night watcher, who did not speak anymore. He waved the black sword in his hand and once again made the same posture as before. His eyes were serious. For hundreds of years, he had been training according to the method that the Xianyuan warrior taught him. However, after hundreds of years, he only learned the qi that the warrior mentioned. This qi was a very special kind of energy, but unfortunately, his body did not have a lot of it, and he could not release the qi out of his body to create a more powerful attack like the Xianyuan warrior. The existence of the qi could only increase his physical strength by a few times. However, the white-robed guards released by the Grand Priest, the number of monsters released by the Grand Priest might not be able to kill all of them before his qi ran out. It seemed that this would be the most dangerous environment that he had ever faced in his long life. Silently calculating the amount of qi in his body, the night watcher looked back and forth between these strange monsters, trying to find an opportunity to break through. However, at this moment, a sharp scream suddenly sounded. It sounded like the howling of the wind coming from the door outside. At the same time, the 7 mutated behemoths that surrounded the night watcher, as well as the white-robed guards who were waiting outside and ready to join in the attack, all let out terrified screams. They even showed a painful expression as if they had touched something terrifying. They fell to the ground one by one, trembling. The night watcher frowned and looked at this scene in confusion. At the same time, he looked at the Grand Priest. He found that the Grand Priest, Siegetu, also had a confused expression on his face. It seemed that something out of his expectation had happened. Suddenly, a strong sense of crisis came, and the night watcher, Otto, instinctively moved his body. A black shadow flashed past him, charging towards one of the mutated beasts. He couldn't see what the black shadow was doing, but he knew that in an instant, the mutated beast's body had already been torn apart. It was the kind of tearing where one's hands were inserted into the monster's body and then violently lifted it up and tore it apart. Then, blood and flesh splattered out, the sharp scream filled the entire room, and this small godly temple even shook because of this loud sound. It was a strange creature about 3 meters tall with a black eagle head, a human body, and a pair of wings on its back. This strange creature was standing in front of the night watcher, and he would have been the first one to be torn apart if he didn't instinctively dodge. Though a night watcher couldn't help but feel a chill on his back. It was a real threat of death. Eagle head, human body. Though a night watcher couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "Horus?" At this moment, this strange creature that suddenly barged into this place went berserk. It was like a lion that entered a rabbit's den, and it easily knocked down all the monsters here, tearing them apart. Soon, the strange creature with an eagle head and a human body killed all the monsters and white-robed guards, and then rushed towards the Grand Priest. However, the glass wall in front of the Grand Priest blocked the attack of this strange creature with an eagle head and a human body. It could only roar crazily at the Grand Priest and hit the invisible wall with both of its hands. Seeing this scene, the Grand Priest frowned. He seemed to have thought of something and took a few steps back, and a pillar rose from under his feet. The Grand Priest pressed his palm on the pillar and then looked at the wall on the other side. A huge screen descended from the wall, and images began to appear on the screen. The Grand Priest seemed to be able to control the images on the screen through the pillar, and soon, a lake appeared on the screen. The main hall in the pharaoh's bedroom. At this time, the pharaoh was strangely muttering something to himself in the bedroom. He walked back and forth, and his expression seemed to be quite excited. Suddenly, the pharaoh inserted his finger into his eye and dug out his eyeball. Just like this, he placed the dug-out eyeball in his palm and stretched it out, as if he wanted to give it to someone. But in the image, there was only the scene of the pharaoh stretching out his hand. There was no one else. Other than that, there was nothing. The Grand Priest's expression instantly became extremely ugly. He adjusted the angle of the image again, but he still couldn't find anything. He had to give up the search and fast forward. Soon, a figure walked into the main hall. Her Highness the Princess. The pharaoh's body of the kingdom actually split open, and a monster with an eagle head and a human body with flesh wings appeared. He almost figured out what happened in a very short period of time. Just like the Grand Priest's reputation of being omniscient in the City of the Sun. Except, he still didn't know who the pharaoh had given the left eye to. Bang, bang, bang. But the pharaoh transformed into an eagle head and a human body didn't stop attacking. As a result, the glass wall made of tempered glass had crisscrossed cracks at this time. Seeing that this specially made tempered glass wall was about to collapse under the attack of the eagle head monster, the Grand Priest looked at it deeply, and without any hesitation, he turned around and retreated. The wall behind him opened a door at this time, and he directly walked through the door. The door slowly descended, and finally, the night watcher heard the Grand Priest's last words before he left. "Otto, I don't know if your special power will work against it?" Bang! The tempered glass wall was completely shattered at this moment, and the strange eagle-head monster crazily crashed into the Grand Priest at this moment. However, when the door finally fell, it finally crashed into the metal wall. The huge force even made a terrible dent in the metal wall. Failing to catch the Grand Priest, the strange eagle-head monster began to crazily beat the wall again. Seeing this scene, the night watcher looked at the screen on the wall again. Left eye. Dug out the left eye. Horus? Inside this oasis temple, what exactly? At this moment, the night watcher's eyes widened again. The surprise even exceeded what he had seen at this time, because the screen that wasn't taken away still faithfully reflected everything. A huge red figure appeared on the screen at this time, and the night watcher couldn't help but whisper at this time, "Finally, I see you again, Genie." Chapter 1544. At night, in the desert, they set up a camp at a place with sand dunes, waiting for the night to pass. But the desert sky at night was beautiful, so beautiful that it was like a dream. They could not help but sit in front of the campfire, looking up at the vast stars. "I heard that in the universe, this little broken ball is nothing. It's really just a little broken ball. Is that right, Mr. Siedjatu? The desert guide Arya came up at this time. Professor Siedjatu was sitting in front of his tent, making a cup of coffee and enjoying the peace at this time. There was another tent next to him, which was Mr. Golden Pupil's tent. Only this guy called Mr. Siedjatu was more pleasing to the eye. Of course, the guy called Golden Pupil next to him was an exception, because he had worked with him several times before, Arya thought. The reason why he found Mr. Siedjatu pleasing to the eye was naturally because Mr. Siedjatu was very friendly and gave him a lot of small things. Among them, there was a very good wine which was a British product. Arya loved drinking, and he did not want to bring this bottle of wine out of the desert, so he was ready to drink it tonight. The world that we can see with our eyes is indeed very small. Professor Siedjatu smiled slightly and said, "But this kind of insignificance is not something that can be experienced in a person's life. Most of the time, we can only imagine it." Arya seemed to be quite interested in the things outside, and he chatted with Mr. Siedjatu casually. In fact, he felt that most of the people who came to the desert this time were people with strange personalities. Even Golden Pupil, who he had worked with several times, did not have a good personality. Of course, this Mr. Golden Pupil was the master of money. That alone was enough to prove that he was the master of money. "Mr. Siedjatu, are you married? At this age, you should have a child, right?" Arya lay on the sand, slightly tipsy. "I'm not married, but I have a daughter." Professor Siedjatu smiled and said, "Her name is Claudia. She is my favorite daughter." "She must be a beautiful girl," Arya said with envy. "I also want to have a family, and then I also want a daughter, but unfortunately, no woman is willing to be with me." Professor Siedjatu looked at him and asked curiously, "Why do you want a daughter?" In the local area, the status of women was relatively low. In an area where men were the main labor force, Arya's way of thinking was relatively different. Arya said without thinking, "How difficult is it to give birth to a boy? When he grows up, you still have to worry about his marriage. Marrying him will require a lot of money. It's different with a daughter. If she gets married, I can receive a lot of money. I don't have any money." Professor Siedjatu was obviously quite surprised by Arya's thoughts. He began to look at Arya seriously, as if he was thinking about something. He suddenly whispered, "What a guy loyal to desire. Ignore this guy." At this time, a man who called himself Golden Pupil walked over. This guy will start to talk about his dissatisfaction with life after drinking a few mouthfuls of wine. All his money is used to support the village. Village? Professor Siedjatu was stunned. When he looked at Arya again, he found that he had fallen asleep with a bottle of wine in his arms. Only some old people, women, and children are left. Golden Pupil sat down casually. He was holding a pot of boiling water with coffee in his hand. Mr. Golden Pupil added some coffee to Professor Siedjatu's cup and said indifferently, "Most of the men in the village are out. Some of these people were desert guides, but they died in the desert. Some worked in other places and would send money back in the beginning, but gradually there was no news of them. He is the only young labor force left in the village." Professor Siedjatu smiled slightly. "No wonder when we were discussing how to enter the desert, you proposed to hire him as a guide." Mr. Golden Pupil said indifferently, "No, I proposed to hire him not because of his situation, but because he is indeed the best guide nearby. For me, he is the best guide, but his situation is a bit special." Professor Siedjatu nodded. "Everyone has their own way of life." Mr. Golden Pupil asked curiously, "Then what is your way of life? As the only one among us who insists on using your original name?" "Truth," Professor Siedjatu said indifferently, "names are not just a symbol for humans. You know, in many ancient myths and legends, names have incredible power." "Are you talking about your real name?" A Golden Pupil frowned and subconsciously found it funny. "But how can a person have a real name?" Professor Siedjatu shook his head. The power of a name is not what it can bring you, but it can let you know who you are, the person in the deepest part of your heart. Mr. Golden Pupil was silent. He held the cup of hot coffee with both hands and felt the passage of time. What about you? Who is the person in the deepest part of your heart? He suddenly asked. Professor Siegetu smiled and said, Myself, the current me. Mr. Golden Pupil looked at Professor Siegetu deeply and thought for a while. Otto, my name is Otto. Surname? Professor Siegetu asked curiously. Only this name. Mr. Golden Pupil. Mr. Otto said indifferently. Professor Siegetu thought for a moment and said, Family, family. Giving up your surname is the same as giving up those. Are you willing to do that? There's nothing to be reluctant about. Mr. Otto smiled casually and said, When you have 69 brothers, and each of them wants the other to die, I don't think you want to be proud of your surname. Professor Siegetu opened his mouth in surprise. At this moment, the drunk Arya suddenly sat up and raised the bottle in his hand, shouting, Long live dollar! Long live! He fell asleep again, snoring loudly as he muttered, long live money. This way of living might not be bad, Mr. Otto suddenly said. Mr. Otto suddenly said, At the very least, it's simpler and doesn't have so many complicated things. I'm starting to get interested in him. Professor Siegetu smiled. He'll be interested in your money, Mr. Otto said noncommittally. They looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, Professor Siegetu said slowly, We can't feel how small this world is. It's so huge in the eyes of mortals. Fate is a wheel that can crush all lives. When it comes, you can't resist it at all. Only in the eyes of the gods, both mortals and the world are small. Maybe that's really the case. Mr. Otto thought to himself. No, that was indeed the case. Because he had seen a god. The genie, the red figure, the ferocious red face, and the flames burning on his body. The flames weren't actually hot, because he had touched them with his own hands. A long, long time ago. Night Watcher, Otto stared at the screen on the metal wall in a daze, but the image on the screen soon turned dark. It was because of the strange creature with an eagle head and a human body. It was crazily pounding on the giant door where the high priest had left. The huge force must have broken the internal circuit of the metal wall, so the screen couldn't work anymore. This strange creature with an eagle head and a human body seemed to be the pharaoh of the kingdom. According to the records that the high priest had seen before, this was indeed the case. Otto was also sure of one thing, and that was the sudden mutation of the pharaoh of the kingdom was completely out of the high priest's expectation. A small stone suddenly rolled to the feet of the night watcher, interrupting his thoughts. He turned around and saw Ibn, who he had been hiding outside, waving at him and whispering, Go! Go! It's dangerous! Do you really want to fight against this horrible thing? You'll die. You'll really die. The night watcher looked up and looked around. Because of the impact of the eagle head monster, the electricity in the room had stopped. He didn't know if the electromagnetic field outside the miniature temple had stopped working. Go! The night watchers raised their swords to guard against the mad eagle-headed creature and quickly joined Ibn. It seemed that the high priest's wish was going to fail. This eagle-headed creature was not interested in the night watchers at all. Where are we going? Ibn hurriedly asked. The night watcher said directly, Go to the square and see if you can pick up the weapon. Since the appearance of this eagle-headed monster made the senior priest panic, then let's make this palace, this place completely chaotic. As he spoke, the night watcher took out a palm-sized box from his clothes. He sneered and pressed a button in the box without thinking. What is this? Ibn instinctively felt a sense of danger and wanted to get close. He couldn't help but ask with a trembling voice. The night watcher coldly laughed and said, A time bomb. I only brought a few before I entered the desert, just in case. Finally, I can put them to good use. Ibn blinked. The information that appeared in his mind wasn't the use of this time bomb, but why did this guy bring this thing into the desert? So what is this bomb? Ibn asked subconsciously. The night watcher indifferently said, Her Highness Princess of Sun City is probably a person with a scientific spirit. She has an independent research lab in the palace. Of course, this shouldn't be hidden from the High Priest. But for some reason, the High Priest knew but tacitly agreed to what the princess did. And then? The night watcher directly said, In the innermost part of this research lab, there is a giant beast hidden. And it is a living giant beast. I'm just opening the cage that's trapping this giant beast. Ibn suddenly patted his head and realized, I see, that is to say, a giant beast will appear in the palace soon. Mr. Night Watcher, you are really full of evil. What? Giant beast? What the? I just want the way out. The Night Watcher indifferently said, The life and death of the residents of Sun City has nothing to do with me. This is my way of life. If you don't want to die, follow me. I will take you out of here. I will follow you. Even if I die, I will follow you, Mr. Night Watcher. Ibn said without thinking, Only by following you can I have wealth. I'm not afraid of death. It's best if I don't die. The room began to collapse. The strange creature with an eagle head and a human body was not satisfied with simple physical collision at this time. It even opened its mouth and spat out blue and white light. The light could penetrate the surrounding metal walls in an instant. Siejatu, what are you hiding here? The night watcher couldn't help but take a deep breath, pulling Ibn with one hand and rushed out of here. Metal doors opened one after another in front of the high priest. Behind these automatic doors was a seemingly endless passageway. He suddenly stopped, but the metal door in front of him didn't continue to open. The high priest turned a direction, and the metal wall next to him opened. He walked in, and it turned out to be an elevator that could lead to the underground. The elevator descended all the way to the deepest part of the temple. He silently watched everything that was happening on the screen inside the elevator. Who was it that woke it up? The high priest's brows were furrowed deeper than ever. Horus! The high priest's body suddenly jolted. The elevator had reached the end and stopped. He quickly walked out of the elevator. Before him was a long metal staircase. Surprisingly, below the metal staircase was a huge pool that emitted a blue fluorescent light. The metal staircase led to a platform in the middle of the huge pool. On this platform, there was a platform that was as tall as a person. On this platform, there was a golden scale placed there quietly. The high priest walked up the stairs and arrived at the platform. He casually glanced at the pool beneath his feet before walking directly to the platform. Behind him, in the pool that was emitting a faint blue light, there were many human faces. Many human faces with closed eyes were floating under the surface of the water at this moment. No. They were not human faces, rather, they were people with their eyes closed, submerged within the pool. Chapter 1545. I want to listen to the story. The young princess was looking at her mother on the bed. She acted coquettishly and said that she wanted to continue listening to her mother's story. The little princess really felt that her mother was the best storyteller in the world. Her mother's story was always so novel and interesting. It was a novel story that she had never heard from the servants in the palace. Moreover, the story was always endless. Then what story does Yamarana want to listen to? The gentle mother gently kissed the little princess's cheek and said in a low voice, If Yaman Lana sleeps well, mother will tell you tomorrow. The little princess said, I want to listen to the story of the mermaid princess. Okay. Her mother was really gentle. The little princess hugged the pillow contentedly and fell asleep. In her dream, she felt as if she had really become a mermaid swimming in the sea. But she had never seen the sea. Not to mention the sea, even a small river in the desert was rare. It was said that there was an underground river under the Sun City, and the water that people in the city drank daily was extracted from the underground river. But the little princess had a good imagination. She imagined the river to be infinitely vast, which seemed to be the appearance of the sea. It must be very cool to swim in the sea, right? Just like that day when it rained, the water droplets in the sky gently wetted her face. The wet and cool feeling was still fresh in the little princess's memory. Drip well, the wet rain fell on her cheek. Drip cool and cool. Drip, drip. She woke up from that free and beautiful dream. What her little eyes saw was a shadow in front of her. There was a familiar fragrance, the fragrance of her mother, and even her mother's clothes. However, the clothes had already been torn apart. She saw a much bigger thing than her mother in the past. Messy hair that resembled algae, cracked eyelids and pupils that rotated like spirals, withered fingers and a nose. A very long nose like an elephant's nose, and a gray and black face. The little princess's eyes suddenly widened, and this horrible shock made her open her mouth wide. Seeing that the little princess was about to scream, the thing in front of her suddenly covered the little princess's mouth with its withered hand. At the same time, its other hand was strangling the little princess's neck. The teeth in its cracked mouth were as sharp as saws, and sticky saliva was flowing out from between these sharp teeth. The little princess's bed and the ceiling of the entire dormitory had been covered with white threads at some point in time. It was a web, a spider's web. It was Mother's scent. It vaguely resembled Mother's face, except that its nose was very long, like a monster. However, only half of its body resembled that of a human, while the other half was that of a giant spider. The immense fear caused the little princess's body to tremble all of a sudden. Tears welled up in her eyes. However, the giant spider monster pressing down on her opened its mouth that was full of sharp teeth with all its might. It looked like it wanted to eat the little princess. I told you to sleep well, why don't you listen? Yamanlana, if you sleep like this, I won't be able to tell you stories tomorrow. It was Mother's voice. Mother's voice became very sharp, very strange, accompanied by the sound of laughter. Mother, how did Mother become like this? This might be a nightmare. She wanted to wake up, but she couldn't. Her neck was strangled, making it very difficult for her to breathe. Then, a shrill cry rang out. Immediately after, a sharp blade pierced through the arachnid monster's body from behind, directly chopping off its head. Blood was like rain. It should have been, but what fell down was the most familiar thing to people who lived in the desert. Sand. Its head turned into sand, and its body turned into sand. Then, it spread out. Everything turned into sand. The little princess didn't dare to speak. She curled up and sat up. In this pile of sand, she was strangely and fearfully looking at the owner of the knife that killed the monster. Father, she saw the man who was closest to her. The man was silent at this time, his face was pale, and his eyes were fixed on the little princess who curled up on the bed. Forget everything that happened tonight, Yamanlana. Your mother has died of illness, Yamanlana. The man stabbed the knife into the floor and picked up the little princess with one hand. Remember, you just had a nightmare. Sleep, Yamanlana. He carried her and slowly walked out of the dormitory. He felt her over and over again. This was just a nightmare, and she would wake up soon. When she closed her eyes and fell asleep, the nightmare would disappear when she woke up again. It was just a nightmare. Over and over again. Her Royal Highness' steps were slightly unstable. She had to hold the wall next to her to relieve the dizziness at this time. Sphyx, who had turned into an eagle-headed creature, threw her hard against a pillar. The princess was very clear that her condition was not as good as it looked. She subconsciously touched her neck. This place was pinched by the eagle-headed creature, so it left a very obvious bruise, just like that time when she was a child. Her Royal Highness clenched her fists and punched the wall with all her might. She even bit her lips so that her mind could clear up. Run. Run. Giant beast, there is a giant beast. A giant beast invaded the palace. Guards. Where are the guards? Go and protect Sphyx. Inform the temple. Only the white-robed guards can deal with the giant beast. Ah, help! Help! At this moment, chaos broke out. The sound of screams made the princess steps slow down at once. She suddenly looked in the direction of the sound. That seemed to be the location of the research institute she built. Giant beast? Giant beast? Could it be? The princess couldn't help but be shocked. At this time, she had vaguely realized the origin of the giant beast that invaded the palace. Her face couldn't help but change. If that was the case, Sun City would usher in an unprecedented disaster. But why did this giant beast wake up? Logically, it shouldn't be able to leave. The cage used to imprison it was made of the same material as the one used to build the god's palace. She couldn't ignore these guards and servants who were attacked by the giant beast and were in danger, even if she was chasing after the eagle-headed SBHYNX. Gritting her teeth, the princess had to go directly to the place where the screams came from. On the way, there were palace guards and servants who were running out. Don't panic. Calm down. Organize the defense formation. Quiet down. She pulled out her gun and fired. The bullets were fired into the night sky. The loud gunshots made the palace guards and servants who were running away suddenly stop. Pick up everything you can see that can be used as a weapon. The princess waved her hand. Use this place as a defensive fortress. Don't let the giant beast rush out of this area. Someone, take my token to the outside of the palace and report to the crusading army. In the name of Princess Yamelana, I allow the crusading army to enter the palace. Princess. It's the princess. Your Highness. Yes, with the princess, we can definitely defeat the giant beast. Your Highness, I'm ready to protect the princess with my life. They're starting to feel less fearful. Her Royal Highness nodded to herself. She quickly ordered all the guards she could see and could command to form a temporary team and head towards the palace area where the giant beast had appeared. The one with the longest night hasn't come yet. Is Sun City going to face a catastrophe? Before reaching the area where the giant beast appeared, the princess's heart couldn't help but sink, because at this time she was about to face the most difficult situation in the past 10 years of war. It's really a nightmare. The princess smiled bitterly. But this time there was no man with a long sword to tell her that as long as she fell asleep, everything would be fine when she woke up again. Soon, the princess led the temporarily formed team to the place where the giant beast appeared, the Research Institute. It's really here. The princess's face was extremely ugly. The Research Institute that she had built was no longer what it used to be. The collapsed roof crushed countless young scholars who were working hard to solve the secrets of the giant beasts. That was the team that she had worked hard to cultivate and teach over the past few years, but now it had been destroyed in one day. Above the collapsed rubble, there was a huge shadow at this time. It looked like the most common cobra in the desert, but it had 3 huge heads. At the same time, its body was so thick that it needed 4 people to wrap their arms around it. On its 3 heads there was a hard horn. Everyone, be careful. The liquid spat out by this giant beast can corrode rock. Don't touch it. Her Royal Highness took a deep breath and took a shield from one of the guards. Then, she raised her long saber and circled around to the back of the giant beast. She then stabbed her saber into the gap between the scales of the giant beast's tail. The attack was effective, and the coiled giant beast immediately let out a painful cry. Attack. Just like what I just did. Some people attract the attention of the giant beast in front of me. The princess raised the long sword in her hand at this time and said loudly, Men of the kingdom, I, Yamanlana, will give my love to the bravest warrior. She struggled to rush toward the giant beast. The guards were encouraged, and their fighting spirit was unprecedentedly high. It looked so exciting, so passionate and fierce. It looked so shocking, so selfless and selfless. In a certain secret room in the temple, Yamanlana silently watched the scene on the screen. The princess of the kingdom was leading a temporarily formed team to fight against the giant beast in the palace. This was a very strange viewing experience. She was like an outsider, watching herself fighting in a bloody battle at this time. What she saw was not the past, but a real battle that happened in the same time and space, in the same place, not far from her. So, I used to fight like this before. The light and shadow on the screen kept flashing in this enclosed room, and also flashed on her face. Yamanlana suddenly turned her face and saw the clothes on the cylindrical table behind her. Modern women's clothes, shoes, and socks. At this time, the screen flashed, and the high priest appeared in front of Yamanlana. The background seemed to be a place she had never seen before. But Yamanlana didn't have time to hesitate, and just instinctively avoided the eyes of the high priest. Even if it was through the screen. Yamanlana, haven't you changed your clothes? The high priest's voice was calm, but it was faster than usual. You are hesitating, you are disappointing me. They are fighting against the giant beast. Yamanlana slowly raised her head. She is leading them to fight against the giant beast. I shouldn't leave like this. The high priest said indifferently. They don't need you there, because she is you, she is already there, so they don't need two princesses. We don't have time, there are some unexpected situations, we need to leave this place immediately, come to me immediately. As soon as the high priest's voice fell, the metal wall not far in front of Yamanlana directly cracked, and a bright passage appeared. The high priest said directly at this time, I will wait for you at the door, don't let me wait for too long. Yamanlana, I love you more than anyone else in this kingdom. What happened? Yamanlana frowned and said, Why did this giant beast appear? It should be placed in my research institute. Except for me, only you know how to open the mechanism. Those researchers don't have enough knowledge to open the lock of the cage. It's not me. The high priest said indifferently, but I probably know who it is. Now is not the time to talk about this. 5 or 20 minutes, the time to open the door, so, after 20 minutes, we will meet at the door. I have already taken the Libra, this place will collapse soon, come quickly. The screen flashed and returned to the scene of the battle. Yamanlana's face slightly changed at this time. The Libra? Sun City is going to be destroyed? Yamanlana looked like she was suddenly drained of energy. Looking at the bright passage on the wall, her thoughts were in a mess. At this time, the door on the other side of the room quietly opened automatically. A young man wearing a palace guard's uniform walked in while looking around curiously. Yamanlana looked at the young guard in disbelief. What happened to you? Your Highness, so you are here too. The young guard smiled at this time. I just wandered around and came to this place. It's really amazing. Who would believe you? Chapter 1546. Everything here was too important to her. In an instant, it was more important than a certain good impression of Yamanlana in her heart. Without any recollection, the moment the young guard spoke, Yamanlana quickly reached for her waist. Since it was an instinctive action, once she encountered a dangerous situation, she would always want to take out the divine artifact. However, she neglected one thing. At this time, she didn't wear the divine artifact at all. So, she directly touched nothing. She pressed her palm on her waist and made a gesture of pulling out a gun. However, she didn't know whether to pull it out or not. She could only freeze there. The young guard, Boss Luo, blinked, as if he didn't see Yamanlana's awkward situation at this moment. He slowly walked into the room. How did you come here? After a moment of silence, Yamanlana calmed down and frowned. She asked, How much do you know? I just happen to know some things. Boss Luo said casually, looking at the clothes on the cylindrical table. These clothes are quite similar to the clothes of one of my classmates. Yamanlana's breathing suddenly quickened and she blurted out, You came from outside? Boss Luo asked curiously, Your Royal Highness, where do you mean by outside? Don't ask when you already know the answer. Yamanlana said in a deep voice, Tell me, how much do you know? When did you start standing outside the door? I just arrived. Boss Luo shook his head. I followed the footsteps of His Majesty Pharaoh. He was in the front and I was behind him. However, he didn't come here now. He is temporarily trapped somewhere here. My father, he entered the temple? Yaman Lana stared at him in disbelief, and her frown deepened. She was still staring at him with suspicion, but she stepped back until she reached the control panel in the room. She was the princess of the kingdom of the City of the Sun, a princess who lived in this era that was suspected to be the ancient Egyptian civilization. However, at this time, she was using everything on the control panel skillfully against common sense. The images on the screen kept switching. From the image of Her Royal Highness leading the palace guards to fight the giant beast, it instantly switched to the inside of the temple. However, she didn't find what she was looking for. Yamanlana's eyes turned cold. She looked at Boss Luo and said coldly, "You lied to me. Let me try." Boss Luo didn't care. He walked to Yamanlana's side, looked at the many buttons on the table, and casually pressed a few of them. In Yamanlana's opinion, he was just randomly pressing the buttons. She couldn't help but feel angry. She felt like she was being toyed with. However, at this moment, the screen suddenly flashed, and a roaring sound was transmitted into her ears through the voice control system. Eagle head, human body, fleshy wings and madness. How could this be? Yamanlana put her hands on the table and opened her eyes wide. What's going on? There's another one here? Boss Luo's finger inadvertently touched another button on the panel, and another image appeared on the other side of the screen. This image was the same as the one that Night Watcher Otto saw. It was the scene where the pharaoh of the kingdom mutated into an eagle head and human body. It's really, Father. When this image appeared, Yamanlana seemed to be drained of all her strength. She suddenly knelt on the ground. She should be the strongest woman in the entire Sun City, but at this moment her eyes were filled with panic. Impossible, why what? Boss Luo asked curiously, why? Did the high priest hide this from you, and even prevent you from seeing this through the control system? She nodded subconsciously. Her mind was blank. Maybe it was like this, or maybe it was something else. She subconsciously didn't dare to look at the image on the screen. Luochu said calmly, "Generally speaking, if you don't want someone to see something, it's because you don't want them to know something. This is more beneficial to the original author." "No, he wouldn't lie to me. He's my..." Yamanlana wanted to deny something without thinking, but she couldn't help but think of the betrayal she had just received. He mutated her into a giant beast in people's eyes, framed her, and brought her here. Although she couldn't accept the means, she knew that it was for her own good. So, she didn't have any resentment in her heart. But in order to hide the fact that the pharaoh had mutated so that she could follow him and leave Sun City, Yamanlana couldn't help but fall into some kind of uncertainty. Suddenly, Yamanlana gritted her teeth, stood up, and wanted to walk towards the passage that led to the place where she and the high priest had agreed to meet. Luochu asked at this moment, "Where are you going?" Yamanlana said, "To ask clearly. He will know this." Boss Luo nodded and moved aside, indicating that Yamanlana could go. Yamanlana didn't think and quickly walked into the passage, followed by Boss Luo. But she didn't realize that from the moment this young guard suddenly appeared here until now, all her vigilance towards him seemed to have disappeared. All the unreasonable things seemed to be hidden. The existence of this young guard seemed to be another version of herself in her heart. Thoughts and answers. They were evolved between her and him, just like her own thoughts and answers. This was a very long, spiraling staircase that led downwards. Yamanlana was almost running down the staircase. But no matter how she ran, the young guard could always follow behind her, and he even walked. This extremely uncoordinated following didn't make Yamanlana curious at this moment. Soon, she had finished this long staircase. At the bottom, there was a pool that emitted a faint blue luster. A huge pool. Luo Qiu saw many bodies sinking in the pool. Under the dim blue light of the pool, There were many pale faces floating in the water. You couldn't even count how many faces there were. Why are these people here? Boss Luo walked along the edge of the platform in the center of the pool and asked Yamanlana. At this moment she was walking towards another passage that led to the platform. This passage was above the pool, and it led to the place where the door was mentioned by the high priest. They are all residents of the City of the Sun, Yamanlana said quickly. The people here are the real ones. Boss Luo said indifferently. Are the residents of the City of the Sun fake? Yamanlana said. No, they are real, but at the same time they are clones. The high priest has a scale in his hand. This scale can weigh a person's kindness and ugliness. The people in the pool are the ugliness measured by the scale. Ugly? Boss Luo blinked his eyes and looked at the people in the pool, as if he was thinking about something. Yamanlana nodded. The City of the Sun is in a subspace that is different from the real world. A certain amount of energy is needed to maintain this subspace. The scale has the function of transforming these ugliness people into energy that stabilizes this subspace. Your Highness, are you also in this pool? Boss Luo suddenly asked a very sharp question. This forced Yamanlana to stop suddenly. Her gaze changed slightly, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she looked at the young guard behind her, tilted her head slightly and said, I'm not here. What about the high priest? Boss Luo continued to ask. Yamanlana shook her head. Luocho didn't ask anything else, but continued to follow Yamanlana and left the space where the pool was located. In the hall of the pharaoh's bedroom, the red lamp genie placed the little maid directly on the pharaoh's throne at this time, and took out a fan, fanning the little maid hard. Finally, the little maid's eyelashes trembled slightly, and the red lamp genie fanned harder. Yes. Yes, yes. That's it, wake up quickly, wake up. You finally wake up. The red lamp genie was as excited as a bull, waiting for the little maid to wake up, and opened its bloody mouth. The little maid who just opened her eyes saw this scene, and her eyes rolled back in an instant. Seeing that she was about to pass out again, the smart red lamp genie directly said in a sharp voice, If you fall asleep again, I'll let 10,000 bulls come to you. Perhaps the threat really worked. The little handmaiden woke up in an instant. After waking up with a start, the little handmaiden immediately screamed. The red lamp genie covered his ears and didn't do anything. After the little maid screamed until she had no strength and had to stop, he stared at her with shining eyes. Little girl, you've screamed. I know you must be very excited now, but it doesn't matter. It's not important. The important thing is, do you want 500 wishes? The little maid, whose mind was quite simple, screamed again at this time. The red lamp genie rolled his eyes, plugged his ears with his fingers again, and asked again after the little maid finished screaming, 500 wishes or, 500 wishes, 5, If you scream again, I'll let 10,000 bulls trample on your body. The red lamp genie screamed this time, 10,000 bulls. The kind in heat. The little maid curled up on the throne, looking pitifully, at the same time reaching out and constantly pinching her cheeks. Her little cheeks turned red. Listen, you're not dreaming, especially not having a nightmare. The red lamp genie sighed at this time. I'm the lamp genie who can help you fulfill any wish, whether you want wealth, status. Speaking of this, the red genie could not help but recall that the last summoner had dissed her, saying that this line was outdated. She coughed twice and said, In short, no matter what you want, I can help you. You see, you are so kind and beautiful. Even the gods will love you. That's why they sent me here to help you fulfill your wish. The little maid suddenly widened her eyes, looked at him suspiciously, and then stretched out her finger. The red lamp genie probably knew what the little maid wanted to do, so he moved his old face closer to the little maid's finger. The little girl probably just wanted to touch him. Seeing this, the little handmaiden tried to pull out the red genie's beard, but she couldn't pull it out no matter how hard she tried. You must believe me, if you are not my summoner, I will give you to 10,000 bulls." The red lamp genie's flame suddenly soared. But at this moment, there seemed to be a voice louder than the roar of the red lamp god coming from outside the hall. The little handmaiden was startled and asked subconsciously, "Outside? What's going on outside?" The red lamp genie waved his hand impatiently at this time. At this time, a water curtain slowly opened in front of the little maid's eyes. The flowing water curtain magically showed an image at this time. The little maid widened her eyes and saw clearly what appeared on the water curtain. She suddenly jumped up from the throne. "Your Highness! Your Highness?" The red lamp genie looked sideways and then shook his head. He was not very interested in everything here, but he wanted the little maid to help him fulfill the limit of 1,000 wishes, so he rolled his eyes and said, "This princess doesn't look very good. Do you want to save her?" The little maid nodded without hesitation. Can you help me save His Highness? Master Giant Beast, please." What the hell was a giant beast? The red lamp genie shook its head, but it thought that it was a good thing to let the little girl see its power. Besides, it still needed the little girl's help to fulfill the 500 wishes later. It did not want to wait for the next summoner. Who knew if the next summoner would be as bad as the little girl's previous summoner? "Yes, as long as you sincerely make a wish to me." At this time, the red lamp genie put on a smile that it thought was the most beautiful at this time, and it smiled like a thief. "Come on, tell me your first wish. Let me save this princess who is in danger." The little maid nodded, then she thought about it, put her hands together, and walked slowly to the red lamp genie in a very formal manner. She knelt in front of the red lamp genie with a sincere face. "Master Giant Beast, Alan is not delicious. But it doesn't matter if you want to eat me, as long as you can make Her Highness happy. Please, I beg you, you must make Her Highness happy." "Well, I will fulfill your first wish. What are you again?" The red lamp genie suddenly widened its eyes. "I said, you can make a wish for me to save her. I want Her Highness to be happy." The little maid said pitifully, Can't I? Don't eat me, genie." The lamp genie was furious, and it wanted to tell the little maid that even the spirit of the magic lamp had dignity. But at this time, the magic lamp suddenly lit up, and a command was directly imprinted into the red lamp genie's mind. The first wish was to make Her Highness happy. The red lamp genie was speechless. Anyway, it was not the first time it lost its dignity. That's why I said that women are the most treacherous, evil, and shameless creatures. Chapter 1547. As a tool. Oh, as a great genie of the lamp. So, no matter what the summoner wished for, as long as the wish was acknowledged by the lamp, the red genie would do its best to fulfill it. It really depended on its mood. For example, if the summoner wished for the ability to live forever, there were many ways to do it. For example, if the summoner was petrified and turned into a stone, the summoner would be granted immortality, right? This was a very efficient and feasible method that the red genie had come up with after fulfilling hundreds of wishes. Of course, the lamp's acknowledgement of the red genie's wish seemed to depend on its mood as well. The definition of happiness was too broad. The red genie could not help but frown. How could the magic lamp agree with such a general wish without any specific direction? Happiness. Did he want to maintain the pace of the Princess Happiness Index, or was it enough to let her feel happiness for a moment? The red genie had always felt that the lamp was not a lifeless instrument, but something that could think and make judgments. It could not help but wonder if the lamp had sensed its plan to fulfill 500 wishes, so it purposely acknowledged the little girl's wish to give it some kind of warning. "Got it. You want the princess to be happy, right?" The red genie answered with a lack of interest. It was like a plant that had withered, without any vitality. The little handmaiden did not care about that. She nodded vigorously. The red genie shook its head and waved its hand at the little handmaiden. As it waved its hand, a red light flashed across the little handmaiden's body, and a set of golden armor appeared on her body. She held a golden spear in her right hand, and a small golden round shield was attached to the gauntlet on her left hand. Miraculously, she actually didn't feel the weight of this entire set of golden armor. It felt as light as an ordinary piece of clothing. "What's this? Don't you want the princess to be happy?" the Red Genie said impatiently. "If you want her to be happy, you have to let her live first, right? If she dies, I will have to spend a lot of effort to revive her. So, of course, you have to save her first." I'm going to save him?" The little maid immediately reacted. The Red Genie said calmly, "I gave you enough power to defeat this big guy. Of course, you have to do it yourself. You didn't ask me to do it. I still have to think of a way to make this princess happy. How can I have so much free time? Go early and come back early. If you can't come back, then don't come back." As he spoke, the red lamp god blew at the maid. A scarlet wind blew in the hall, blowing the maid out of the hall. She couldn't help but scream in fear. The Red Genie of the 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 Genie. But if the summoner wanted to die, it couldn't stop them. "What the hell is this place? Why do I feel so uneasy?" As it sat there, an inexplicable thought began to churn in the mind of the Red Genie, making it seem rather restless. It felt like something was spying on it. The Red Genie frowned and then suddenly looked at the corner of the hall. Its body floated directly to the wall in the corner of the hall. Looking at the wall, the Red Genie frowned even more. Suddenly, it thrust its palm into the wall. The wall instantly cracked open, and the Red Genie dug out something from the inside of the wall. It was a strange metal box, and on top of the metal box there was a string connected to it. The Red Genie pulled the string that connected the box, and soon, it took out a similar metal box from another part of the wall. This box was also connected to a string. The Red Genie was even more confused this time. It began to pull the string again, and then from the walls, the dome, the pillars, and even the floor, it found metal boxes one after another. Why are these things everywhere? The Red Genie was more and more confused at this time. It looked at the large pile of metal boxes in the center of the hall. It felt like these things were the source of the feeling of being spied on. It couldn't help but grab one of the metal boxes and found that it was still connected to a string. And this string was connected to a place outside the hall. The Red Genie's spirit flashed, grabbed the string, and then closed its eyes. As a dignified genie with magical power, it could do many things with magical power. For example, at this moment it was able to use its magic power to let its spiritual sense follow the line that led to the outside. Its spiritual sense was like water flowing into a pipe, instantly spreading to a distant place through the line. After an unknown amount of time, the Red Genie suddenly opened its eyes, revealing a look of surprise. Its spiritual sense had been divided into tens of thousands of parts. This thing. The Red Genie frowned at this time because it found that these strings were like spider silk, covering the entire Sun City. Those metal boxes were like nodes, and there were also a large number of such metal boxes in Sun City. The palace, the streets outside the palace, the houses, the statues, the city walls, and even the rooms of the residents of Sun City. Could it be that this thing is monitoring everything in the entire Sun City? Even as the genie of the magic lamp, it was the first time that the Red Genie was shocked by such behavior. If its intuition was not wrong, then all the creatures in the City of the Sun, no matter what they were doing or saying, were being completely recorded. And the giant net that covered all of Sun City had a spot that resembled a central point. It was not far from the Great Hall, the deepest part of the Imperial Palace where the Holy Temple was. What does it have to do with me? The Red Genie immediately sat back on the Pharaoh's throne lazily. The truth of the matter was that it couldn't be too far away from the magic lamp unless someone carried the lamp. Her Royal Highness's clothes had long been soaked in sweat. She felt that her physical strength was quite limited, and her legs were as if they were filled with gold, becoming heavier and heavier. The huge serpent behemoth in front of her was still fierce at this time. After all, the palace guards were not the soldiers of the punitive army. In the face of such a ferocious behemoth, it was extremely difficult for them to raise their weapons and organize an attack. It was obviously difficult for them to stab the gap between the scales of the behemoth, even though they were trying so hard. Just as Her Royal Highness felt that the situation was getting more and more out of control, the palace guards who went to inform the punitive army outside the palace finally succeeded in leading the punitive army into the palace. Her Royal Highness did not relax because of this. At this time, she was leaning on a broken pillar, trying to restore her strength as soon as possible, and at the same time, she also commanded the punitive army to start fighting against the rioting behemoth. Prepare the incendiary bombs. At this time, the punitive army soldiers poured black oil into containers and then ignited them. They threw these burning containers directly at the serpent behemoth with special tools. The serpent behemoth's body was instantly on fire. Formation, sprint. Spearmen, get ready! Her Royal Highness's voice echoed on the battlefield. The shield warriors and spearmen advanced step by step at this time, and in a staggered manner, the sharp spears pierced toward the weak points of the serpent behemoth's scales. Under the burning fire, the behemoth uttered a painful cry. At the same time, not only did the attacking spears break through its scales, but the punitive army was different from the palace guards. They had rich experience in hunting behemoths, and their cooperation was honed time and time again through 10 years of punitive expeditions. We can win. Seeing this scene, the guards immediately called out to him. Her Royal Highness had recovered some strength at this time. She slowly raised the black pistol in her hand and aimed at the head of the serpent behemoth. She intended to shoot through the eyes of this behemoth so that the punitive army could encircle and kill it more easily. But at this time, a strange change occurred. At this time, a gray crystal in the lower jaw of the serpent behemoth suddenly burst out a strange green light. The moment the green light lit up, the serpent behemoth opened its mouth and swallowed all the flames on its body. Even the punitive army had never seen a behemoth swallowing flames. They couldn't help but be shocked. The serpent behemoth suddenly opened its mouth again and made a loud noise that shook the sky. The loud roar seemed to shake the whole desert. At this time, after making a loud noise, the serpent behemoth opened its mouth again, and this time it spat out a fierce flame. The punitive army's armor could resist the attack of sharp weapons and cushion the impact of huge forces, but it couldn't resist the invasion of flames. In just a moment, the originally good situation fell into the abyss. Seeing the punitive army being burned by the flames one after another, the princess was shocked and had to force herself to calm down. Retreat. Maintain the formation. Retreat. Retreat. I said retreat, retreat. No matter how loud her voice was, the screams could always be drowned out. The princess even felt a faint pain in her throat, and she immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood. But this wasn't the most desperate thing. The most desperate thing was that the princess actually found that under the rubble of the research institute, there seemed to be something surging. Suddenly, a huge white bone arm broke through the rubble and stretched out, not far from the princess. At the same time, a shrill scream was heard. On the other side, the palace guards who were supporting the punitive army were in a mess. On the ground, there was a section of a behemoth's body that was crawling. A pungent smell rushed into the princess's nose at the same time. She sniffed out what this smell was. It was the antiseptic solution that was used to soak the behemoth's corpses in the research institute. Those dead behemoths were actually resurrected at this moment. One after another, the behemoths crawled out of the rubble at this time. Some of them had a complete body, and some only had half of their bodies left. Even if there was only a skull left, there were tentacles of flesh on the skull at this moment. Massacre. The giant snake behemoth alone caused heavy casualties to the punitive army, not to mention the giant behemoths that were used as research specimens in the research institute were resurrected one after another. A one-sided massacre was staged in front of the princess at this time. She looked at the figures of the fallen soldiers blankly. As if thinking of something, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the grey crystal in the jaw of the giant snake behemoth. "It's that cursed stone." The princess instantly thought of something. She pointed the artifact pistol directly at the jaw of the giant snake behemoth and pulled the trigger of the artifact forcefully. Her marksmanship was very good. Each bullet directly hit the cursed stone in the jaw of the giant snake behemoth, but the bullet crystal couldn't destroy this cursed stone. At this moment, behind the princess, a sharp bone spur was stabbing toward her fiercely, but the princess didn't notice it at all. "Your Highness! Be careful!" In a split second, a figure fell from the sky. It was the little handmaiden who was blown here by the strong wind of the genie. The princess was instinctively shocked at this time. When she came back to her senses, she saw the little handmaiden in golden armor blocking an approaching bone spur with the shield in her hand. "Yalian!" The princess called out the name of the little handmaiden. At this time, the little maid only remembered to turn her head. Just as she was about to say something, the golden spear in her right hand silently pierced out. Unexpectedly, it directly pierced through a resurrected giant beast whose corpse had already been peeled open. The bone spike was shockingly shot out from the chest of this giant beast. "Your Highness, I don't know what happened. It moved by itself," the little handmaiden said in horror at this time. But at this time, her movements were like that of a well-tempered warrior. She nimbly dodged the giant beast's attack and counterattacked with the spear in her hand at the same time. The spear could not only easily pierce the giant beast's scales, but also easily lift it up. The little handmaiden in golden armor, Yalian, was like a valkyrie on the battlefield. She killed 5 or 6 resurrected giant beasts by herself. Cursed stone. The princess no longer cared about why the little handmaiden Yalian had such divine power and hurriedly shouted, "That giant beast, do you see the stone in its jaw? Attack it! It's controlling these giant beasts." But I can't reach it?" the little handmaiden replied with a pale face. Unexpectedly, just as she finished speaking, her arm moved automatically. It made a throwing motion, and then the golden spear in her hand was directly thrown out. The golden spear that was thrown out. The golden spear shot out like a sharp arrow, and the sound of air breaking followed. The giant snake seemed to feel the danger and directly wanted to swat the spear flying towards it with its tail. But unexpectedly, the golden spear pierced through its tail without slowing down. In an instant, it pierced through the cursed stone on its lower jaw. Crack! The cursed stone instantly shattered. The moment the cursed stone shattered, the giant snake immediately stopped all movements, and then its body slowly turned into sand. In the end, its entire body turned into sand and then scattered. And at this time, the resurrected giant beasts all fell down. A terrifying crisis was ended by the little handmaiden's throwing of the spear. The princess looked at the little handmaiden in disbelief. She did not know why she had such divine power, but right now she just wanted to hug the little handmaiden who saved everyone. Not good. Not good. At this time, a scream sounded. Outside the city walls, there are giant beasts outside the city walls. Many. 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 Chapter 1548. The giant serpent, whose cursed stone had been broken, was lying on the ground, motionless. However, the soldiers dared not be careless and still surrounded it. Her Royal Highness frowned. She used a piece of cloth torn from her clothes to wrap her palm. She then picked up a piece of the cursed stone. This kind of cursed stone had been pried off by the scholars when they were in the research institute. If humans touched it directly, they would turn into sand. Even the broken cursed stone had the same ability. However, it was the first time that the princess had seen the serpent behemoth resurrecting through the power of the cursed stone and bringing the other behemoths to life. "Your Highness, it's ready." A palace guard hurriedly rushed to the princess's side. "Are we going to ascend the sentry tower now? If we don't do it now, when will we do it?" The princess snorted coldly. There was a tower in the palace, which was requested by the princess in the past. The purpose was to be able to see the situation of the city wall from the position of the palace. It was usually used on the day when the night was the longest. At this time, Her Royal Highness rushed to the sentry tower, and the little handmaiden followed closely behind her. She was still wearing the golden armor, and everyone still remembered her appearance when she destroyed the giant serpent monster. At this time, most of them were in awe of her. The princess was really amazing. A little handmaiden beside her actually had such divine power. She really hid her strength well. Yalian, what happened to you? The princess suddenly lowered her voice and asked after a moment of silence. This little handmaiden did not have such divine power before. She was indeed a very ordinary little girl in the palace. She was very simple-minded and could not hide any secrets at all. The princess did not believe that she would hide it from her all the time. Something must have happened after she left the pharaoh's great hall. That was a very short period of time, and it would be inconceivable for something to happen. Therefore, the princess herself was not completely sure. She stared into the eyes of the little handmaiden, Yalian. It said it's called the lamp god. The little handmaiden hurriedly said, "It came out of the oil lamp your highness gave me. I don't know. I just wiped it a few times." The princess's frown deepened. What did it say? You have to give Yalan 3 wishes. She has to grant them. The little maid recalled the incident with the red genie. He seemed to be in a hurry. I was scared at first, but it didn't seem to be able to do anything to me. It felt like Her Royal Highness reached out to touch the golden armor on the little maid's body. A stream of light flashed across the surface of the golden armor, and she couldn't help but reveal a thoughtful expression. This armor was given to you by it? The little maid nodded. Her Royal Highness asked directly, "Can I take it off?" The little handmaiden shook her head. "No, I tried, but I couldn't take it off. This gun is the same. It will come back by itself after you throw it out." Her Royal Highness nodded and immediately asked, "What about that oil lamp? Where did you put it?" "He's still in the main hall." The little maid slapped her forehead and said, I'm sorry, Your Royal Highness, I fell behind at that time." Her Royal Highness waved her hand and interrupted her. "Since he's still in the main hall, let's talk about it later. No one will be interested in that oil lamp, and now it's a mess. The behemoths are the top priority." Having said that, Her Royal Highness couldn't help but ponder. Did Yalan really summon the genie from that oil lamp? It was true that she threw the oil lamp to Yalan, but that oil lamp also appeared beside her after she woke up out of thin air. While pondering, Her Royal Highness had already climbed up the sentry tower. At this time, a guard brought in a prop that could be used to observe the position of the city wall. This was a magical tool developed by Her Royal Highness Research Institute called a telescope. A monocular. She stretched the monocular and aimed it at the position outside the city wall. In order to allow the area outside the city wall to observe the environment at night, Her Royal Highness ordered people to build many beacon towers outside the city 5 years ago, and they would be lit every night. At this moment, under the illumination of the fire, one could see groups of huge figures surging like a tide. The black mass of behemoths looked as if they would trample all of Sun City into ruins. Even if she was used to seeing behemoths, after 10 years of war, Her Royal Highness couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine. She was well aware of the power of Sun City. Without the protection of the true God's power, there was no way Sun City could survive the charge of a large number of behemoths with its own military strength. However, the true God's protection of Sun City could only be activated on the longest day of the year, and now, that time had not come yet. Your Royal Highness, what should we do?" Behind her, the young handmaiden's trembling voice rang. A blank look flashed in Her Royal Highness' eyes. "Yes, what should we do? We can't stop it alone." Her Royal Highness took a deep breath and said, "I need your help, Yalan. If the legend is true, then you are the only savior of Sun City in this calamity. Me? The young handmaiden's eyes widened at once. Then, as if thinking of something, she gripped the golden spear with both hands and nodded vigorously. All right. I'll go fight them. Your courage is not bad, but you should wipe the tears from your eyes first. Her Royal Highness shook her head and reached out to wipe the tears from the corners of Yalan's eyes. How can I let you go to the battlefield? Even if you want to go to the battlefield, it should be me. This is my responsibility as the Sun Princess. Then, Your Royal Highness is saying? The young handmaiden reacted at once. Lamp God? Yes, if the legend is true. Her Royal Highness nodded. It can help us, and only you can ask it to do so. Are you willing to use a wish that can achieve anything? She nodded heavily without any hesitation. Of course. I think I understand why it didn't have any reaction when I touched it. Her Royal Highness smiled bitterly. I'm not a pure person. Your Royal Highness, how can you not be? Her Royal Highness' hand directly covered the young handmaiden's mouth and whispered in her ear. I'm not as good as you believe. If one day you find out that I'm not me, please don't forget your heart that wants to protect Sun City. Although Yalan didn't understand, she still nodded silently. Her Royal Highness then said in a deep voice, Then, make a vow in front of me. No matter what difficulties you encounter, no matter what desperate situation you encounter, don't forget your determination to protect Sun City. She solemnly made this promise in front of her. Her firm and stubborn eyes were like magnificent pearls. Her Royal Highness then said in a self-deprecating tone, Understand, I'm just a despicable person. One day, you'll understand that I hijacked your thoughts. Go to the palace, find that oil lamp, and make a wish again. Your Royal Highness, you? I want to go to the temple. Her Royal Highness said seriously, Although the blessing of the true God can only be activated during the longest night, I still want to try. With that, Her Royal Highness turned around, waved her hand, and said loudly, Ring the big bell, open the palace, and take refuge in the city. After a while, the huge bell sound spread throughout Sun City, and Sun City began to fall into panic and chaos at this moment. The bell sound also spread to this place. Yamanlana stopped, and Boss Luo behind her said, What's the matter? It's the big bell. Yamanlana was silent for a while, then said in a deep voice, It will only ring when Sun City encounters the biggest threat, and then the palace will open. I dug many cellars around the palace walls that can be hidden and stored materials for many years. If the giant beast breaks into Sun City, can the residents escape? Boss Luo nodded and said, It's really a comprehensive approach. Unless it's a last resort. Yamanlana shook her head. The situation outside is much more serious than I thought. I feel that tonight is the true longest night. Boss Luo said, Why is there a day when the night is the longest night every year? What is attracting the giant beast? Yamanlana said, The day when the night is the longest is the time when the true God's power is the weakest, and the giant beast will have a chance to break into Sun City. Boss Luo said, They know? Yamanlana frowned. There had never been a definite explanation as to why the giant beast only rioted on this day. At least the scholars in the research institute couldn't answer her question. Maybe they know, maybe they don't. Yamanlana sighed and said, There are still many secrets in the subspace where Sun City is located that I can't solve. Because of this, You? Yamanlana said indifferently, I also became selfish. So selfish that I even want to get out of this cage and give up everything here. Retreating in the face of danger is not a shameful thing. Boss Luo said casually, Escaping is often more effective. But it's shameful. Yamanlana gritted her teeth and punched the wall beside her. This hard wall was instantly broken by her fist. Have you seen the true God? Boss Luo handed over a handkerchief. I heard that your highness is the saintess of the temple and can hear the voice of the true God. Not necessarily. Yamanlana quickly wrapped her injured fist with the handkerchief. I can only hear one-sided, and I can only hear some voices occasionally. What are you talking about? Boss Luo asked gently. Yamanlana thought for a while and said, It's not a language that I can understand, it's like a message, I can only understand bits and pieces. But all along, the true God statue seems to be sending me the same message, freedom. Freedom? Boss Luo thought for a while and said, It wants freedom? Yamanlana shook her head. I don't know, it's it or something else. It's just freedom. Boss Luo nodded and immediately asked, Since your Highness can't communicate with the true God, how did it give you the divine artifact? Yamanlana suddenly stared at Luochio and looked at him silently. She slowly opened her mouth and said, You came here from the outside world. Why do you say so? Boss Luo asked back. Yamanlana said, Only in this way, you won't look confused when I tell you the knowledge that doesn't exist here, and you can understand it. It's the same when we were in the research institute. Your Highness is really observant. Boss Luo smiled casually. Yamanlana frowned and said, Answer me, Your Highness. Boss Luo said, How about this, I'll tell you something you want to know, and you answer one of my questions. Okay. Yamanlana said quickly, Let me ask you first. Who are you, and what's your purpose for coming here? Origin or purpose? Boss Luo blinked. Yamanlana frowned. Purpose. Boss Luo said, I came here to find someone. Who? Boss Luo said calmly, Your Highness, this is the second question. Yamanlana looked at Luochio deeply and suddenly said, You can ask, but I won't answer you immediately. You didn't set a time limit for me to answer. Boss Luo smiled and said, Then Your Highness can't ask me the next question. Yamanlana said calmly, But at the same time, you won't know the answer to my first question. Strictly speaking, I'm the one who benefits. Luochio smiled carelessly and then said, Your Highness, do you like here or outside? Yamanlana snorted and turned away. Just as she said, she wouldn't answer immediately. She left just to confirm one thing at first. Now she had confirmed it. This young guard, Ivan, was indeed an outsider. The road ahead seemed to be ending. Yamanlana suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, If you want to find a way out of here, listen to my instructions later. I'll try my best to help you leave here, but I can't guarantee anything. The door has always been in the hands of the High Priest, only he has the way to open it. Boss Luo asked curiously, Why do you want to help me? Yamanlana said calmly, Don't think too much, I just don't want innocent people to get involved. Of course, maybe you're not innocent, but you have a purpose. Ivan. You're a dangerous guy to me, I don't want to get too close to you. Yes, a dangerous guy, a guy who would make people confused. Chapter 1549. Since it's dangerous, I'll just send him away, she said to herself. In fact, there was a better way to solve the problem once and for all, to destroy the thing that brought the threat. She should have made this choice before today. What's disturbing me? What she didn't know was that the road to the door, controlled by the High Priest, was a long one. As the two of them walked side by side, she suddenly had a ridiculous thought. She hoped that this road could go on forever. In that way, she wouldn't know the truth, and she wouldn't have to know the truth. She didn't want to know the truth. She wasn't frightened by this idea. I'm a despicable person, she said while looking at the young guard in front of her. The boss said that he had never met a person who wasn't despicable, including himself in the past. Yamanlana thought for a while and said, Maybe this is the only way to be a complete person. She hoped to be a complete person. The light of the soul flickered in the boss's vision, like a candle in the wind. Then, they arrived at the final destination, the gate. The High Priest was here, holding the scales of good and evil with both hands, as if he was sure that Yamanlana would come to his side. Yamanlana, you didn't let me down, the High Priest sounded so gratified. Yamanlana was sure of one thing, that was, the High Priest didn't see the young guard Ivan, and she couldn't see him at this time. He accompanied me all the way, and it wasn't an illusion. Why does he always disappear when I need him? Just like when I threw the relic of my mother to the pharaoh of the kingdom, he also disappeared suddenly. He always appeared when I needed him. But you let me down. Yamanlana took a deep breath. Maybe he didn't really disappear, but he was still observing, looking at me with his eyes to get the answer. What do you care about? The high priest had extraordinary observation skills. At this time, he noticed that Yamarana's attention was slightly distracted. He couldn't help but frown. Yamarana, this reminds me of your mother. She used to be like this, but when there is another emotion in her heart, she will always show this kind of expression. You two are so alike. Then, did my mother disappoint you? Yamanlana asked calmly as she walked towards the high priestess. The so-called door was not a physical existence. Perhaps it was just a special kind of energy that required the high priest to use special means to appear. If the door did not appear, this was at best an empty house with nothing. Just like the realm of gods, just like the realm of sins, it was always so quiet that even the sound of breathing and heartbeat could be heard clearly. If there was no light here, perhaps a normal person would not be able to stay here for a day. All my love and expectations were once given to her. This was the high priest's answer. She turned into a giant beast right in front of me. Yamanlana shook her head and said, right in front of my eyes, my father killed my mother with his own hands, and then she turned into a giant beast and turned into sand in front of me. This was an accident, Yamanlana. The high priestess opened her hands and said, as a weapon, your mother could not defeat the desire in her heart in the end. I thought that after having a complete life, your mother would become a perfect weapon, but her love for you exceeded the thought of saving you. She became selfish and selfishly devoured it. But I don't regret letting your mother have a complete life, because she gave birth to a more excellent you. Yamanlana, you are the best candidate to become a weapon. You are wrong, I am not perfect at all. Yamanlana laughed at herself and said, it has been so many years. You took me away from the city of the sun, you let me live in the outside world, you let me have the identity of Claudia, you let me go back and forth between two worlds. One is a civilized and free world, and the other is a world where death is always accompanied by every step. Do you know that every time I came back from the outside world, it was so cruel for me? Many times I even didn't want to come back. No, this is the real thing, facing difficulties and fighting for lofty ideals. The high priestess showed a blazing light in her eyes. Only a weapon with a firm belief can become the perfect vessel of the Libra. Every time you can resist the temptation of the outside world and come back, you have done a good job. Yamanlana, you have always done a good job, you are just a little bit lacking. But it doesn't matter, this experience will make you even closer to perfection. In that case, why did you let me leave this time? Yamanlana sneered. Isn't this contradictory? The high priestess said indifferently, as long as you are safe, as long as the Libra is still there, as long as you can become a weapon, the city of the sun will welcome a day of rebirth. Yamanlana, the process of growth is always accompanied by failures and setbacks. Accept them, defeat them, and you will become more perfect. Sun City is just a hotbed to cultivate you. No matter how many I can create, I will be able to create you. You have proved that you have a strong enough will to resist all temptations, so what you need to experience next is despair, greater despair. She suddenly felt that this man was unfamiliar. She didn't know when it started, but this man seemed to have replaced the position of the pharaoh in her heart. Since the pharaoh killed her mother? She didn't know, but she clearly knew that when she went through the magical door and became an ordinary girl named Claudia, and lived in the prosperous and civilized world outside, she had a father-daughter relationship with this man. Siegiatu and Claudia. It made her think that everything in the City of the Sun was just a fairy tale that she heard when she was a child, and it was just something that she imagined in her mind. Isn't this contradictory? Yamanlana shook her head. Since you let me know that this is just an arrangement, you can't achieve the effect of the experiment. I don't understand, how can you, who brought me into the civilized world, make such a low-level mistake? The High Priestess said, It's very simple, because I need you to come here. Coming here is enough, Yamanlana, I said. You did a good job, because you brought me what I needed. I don't understand. Yamanlana couldn't help but frown. At this time, the High Priestess took a step back and reached out her hand to press a brick on the wall behind her. A rumbling sound was heard, and the door behind Yamanlana was directly closed at this time. She subconsciously felt a kind of uneasiness. At the same time, the floor began to crack. At the crack, something was pushing up a huge cylindrical container. Yamanlana's pupils suddenly contracted, and a blank state of understanding began to occupy her mind. She suddenly took 2 steps back, because of fear. The cylindrical container in front of her. In the container in front of her, in the light blue liquid, there was a naked body, her own body. She is the one outside? Yamanlana subconsciously said, You also caught her. No, she is still outside. The High Priestess said indifferently, She is still outside, working hard to command the army to deal with the rioting giant beasts. Because of a man that I appreciate but don't want to cooperate with me, the day of the longest night under the normal procedure has come earlier than expected. Then she is. Yamanlana looked at the body in the container in horror. She suddenly remembered the young guard Iban's question. After Iban saw the person in the pool, he asked her if she was also in the pool. She said no. This is the real you, Yamanlana. The High Priestess smiled slightly and said, Of course, it can also be the real Claudia, whether it is you or the one outside, you are just a part of her. Yamanlana's expression suddenly became excited. She pulled out her gun, and madly shot at the container, so unyielding. But the bullets couldn't break the surface of the container. The naked body in the container seemed to have no intuition. Yamanlana's hands began to tremble. She couldn't accept one thing. She wasn't the real one. The one who was commanding the battle outside wasn't a part of her. She was actually a part of the real one. They were actually a part of the body in the container, a copy. Soon. The High Priestess waved her hand, and the scales of good and evil in her hand suddenly burst out a flash of light. The light shot out and directly trapped Yamanlana, making her unable to move. Soon, a full body you or Claudia will, but then, she will have a more perfect potential as a weapon. Don't come over. You are not the High Priestess I know. Yamanlana's face was full of horror. You are not my father, you are not him. Who are you? You are not him. I said, no matter where I am this identity. The High Priestess walked in front of Yamanlana, reached out and touched her face, and said softly, Those days in the outside world were also my happiest days. Yamanlana, my daughter. Deception, betrayal, anger, despair, hatred. At this moment, in her heart, the degree of grief was even far greater than when the High Priestess framed her in front of everyone and turned her into a giant beast. Why at this moment you still want to mention to let you have the last bit of fantasy and hope in your heart. The High Priestess smiled and said, Then destroy it. As she said, the High Priestess waved her hand, and Yamanlana felt a sharp pain from her abdomen. A dagger pierced into her body from the High Priestess' hand. I need to dig out your soul, Yamanlana. The High Priestess said softly, It already has enough growth. What exactly am I? Of course you are. The High Priestess held her head gently and whispered in a low voice, My most beloved adopted daughter. Her eyes gradually lost their luster, as if she had lost her soul, and became an empty shell. A smile appeared on the High Priestess' face, but his smile suddenly froze because he felt something. The scale in his hand suddenly became hot, and he immediately turned around. Beside the cylindrical container, a young man wearing the uniform of a palace guard had appeared out of nowhere. At this time, the young man pressed his palm on the surface of the cylindrical container and looked at the high priestess. So that's how it is, the soul splitting and the soul regenerating, just like the broken tail of a gecko, it can grow back very quickly. It's really incredible. This is the scales of good and evil. The high priestess' eyes changed from surprise to vigilance, and then calmed down. She frowned and said, "You are the guy who lured the pharaoh to mutate in the hall? How do you know that digging out his left eye can make him?" The young guard shook his head and said, "Compared to this, don't you think it's a pity?" "Pity?" The high priestess smiled casually, but she quietly pointed one side of the scale in her hand at the young guard in front of her. As if he didn't see the high priestess' little action, he thought for a while and said, "This is obviously a beautiful soul that can illuminate the dark night like a star, but why? Why did you let it be tainted and let it completely fall into the abyss? You see, it has become no longer shining, from a gem to an inconspicuous stone. It's really a pity. There are too many beautiful things." The high priestess smiled faintly and said, "But most beautiful things are not real, like glass, they will shatter with a touch. Ugly things are different. They are the toughest things in the world, and at the same time they are the best nutrient." The young guard smiled and said, "The high priestess' method of nurturing souls is really admirable. Let me introduce myself. I am a traveling merchant from the outside world, and I am here to help my customers solve their problems." And then? The high priestess narrowed her eyes slightly. The young guard waved his hand, and the scale in the high priestess' hand suddenly became extremely heavy, and it sank to the floor, almost crushing his palm. He couldn't help but be shocked. "You have something in your heart that you want, I will sell it to you." The young guard thought for a while and said, "But in return, you can sell this scale in your hand and your materials to me." When he heard that the young guard wanted the scale, the high priestess wasn't too surprised, but when she heard about materials, her expression couldn't help but change slightly. "I don't know what you are talking about." The high priestess shook her head. The young guard stepped back, and his finger lightly tapped on the wall. The surrounding walls began to crack, and at the same time, the floor began to crack as well. From the cracked wall, cylindrical containers were pushed out one by one. On the floor, the same cylindrical containers rose up one by one. Within these containers there were naked bodies. Among them there were both males and females, and among them there was even a girl who looked like the little maid Elaine. There were more than 50 of them. For the remnant soul in the scale, one tool probably isn't enough. The young guard said casually, "That's why you need so many. Even for yourself, among the many containers, there was a container, and inside was a body that looked like the high priestess' own body." Chapter 1550. Even if the secret hidden here was discovered, the high priest could still keep his composure. At this time, he held his hands under the scale and tried his best, but he couldn't lift the scale. It seemed to have taken root in the ground. The high priest quickly gave up this futile attempt. He patted the dust on his hands, stood up with his hands on his knees, and faced the young guard in front of him. "I seem to have encountered something beyond my understanding. It seems that this time Otto's clone outside not only brought Claudia, but also brought some unexpected things. What are you? The genie with mysterious power?" The young guard, Boss Luo curiously said, "It seems that Your Excellency High Priest really knows a lot of things from Mr. Otto. However, I don't seem to see Mr. Otto here." He was referring to the fact that Otto didn't exist in these containers. The high priest said, "It's a pity that Otto's original body is difficult to capture, even if he has fallen into Sun City. But it doesn't matter, there is a backup of Otto in the scale anyway. Let's talk in detail, I have a few questions." Boss Luo smiled, then waved his hand, and a stool appeared behind the high priest out of thin air. The high priest's body uncontrollably sat on the stool that appeared behind him, then the stool moved forward and sent him directly in front of Luocio. Round table, another chair. The boss slowly sat down, and a teapot and cups began to appear on the table. Luocio poured tea into the teacup and said casually, "If you don't want to talk, you can stop at any time, but if you want to continue the conversation, you can ask Your Excellency High Priest to put down the remote control under your sleeve first. Even if this is completely blown up, I probably won't be hurt." The High Priest stared at the young guard in front of him. In the end, without saying a word, he took out a remote control hidden in his sleeve and placed it on the table. He frowned and said, "You want the Libra, you want the material here. You can easily take it from me, why are you still discussing it with me?" "Based on a rule." Boss Luo smiled and said, "And rules are rules. I never had the intention of robbing other people's things. You were the one who discovered the Libra, and these people in the container were also collected by you over the years. It can be considered as the success of your labor. It's yours." The High Priest couldn't help but frown. He could vaguely feel that this fellow didn't have a universal view of right and wrong, and did as he pleased. "What do you want to know?" The High Priest remained silent for a moment. He knew that in the face of an incomprehensible power, he could only compromise. Moreover, Tian Cheng's power seemed to be suppressed by the other party. For example, how did the High Priestess get the scales of good and evil? Boss Luo asked after some thought. The High Priest suddenly glanced at Yamanlana's position. He was surprised to find that the light from the scale did not disappear. It was still trapping Yamanlana like a shelf. The wound on her abdomen was still there, but the blood had stopped flowing. It was as if time had stopped for her. The High Priest could clearly see a drop of blood floating above the ground, nothing special. The High Priest said indifferently at this time, "I'm just a very ordinary person who escaped from the war. I fled to wherever I could survive. I didn't know where I was, so I walked when there was a road. As I walked, I encountered the temple in the oasis, and then I got this Libra. What do you think? Are you disappointed?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "Let's say this is more realistic. If this is not an arrangement, but an accidental encounter, don't you think this is a very interesting variable? Do you believe in fate?" The High Priest asked curiously. This question was abrupt, and it was not helpful to his current situation, but he just wanted to ask. "I can't say that I believe in it." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "But I won't deny it. If I deny it again, it will be unhappy." "You really dare to say that?" The High Priest couldn't help but sneer, as if he saw a lunatic. But he didn't know why, at this moment, his heart was beating wildly, as if there was a voice in his head warning him that this was not a joke, this was real, there was really someone who could control fate according to his own will. But, control fate? Who could control fate? Even those who boasted that they had their own fate in their hands could not predict what would happen tomorrow. It was very likely that they would encounter an accident tomorrow and die. "Just take it as a joke." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Just to liven up the atmosphere. After all, if I look more mysterious in the next conversation, I can take advantage of more. I have been learning to do business recently, so I will more or less use some small tricks. I hope the High Priest doesn't mind." This is not the words of a qualified businessman. The High Priest shook his head. "Probably." Luocio did not comment. "When you found the Libra, did Sun City already exist?" The High Priest nodded, then shook his head. He suddenly had a feeling of absurdity. He was clearly in control of everything, so why did things suddenly take a turn for the worse, and why did something that he could not understand appear? This was like a joke played by fate. Perhaps all living things were just toys in the hands of fate. "When I found Sun City, it was just a dead city." The High Priest recalled and said, "The Libra has the ability to weigh a person's good and evil, and divide good and evil. The residents in the city are all divided by this ability?" Luocio thought for a while and said, "The soul is divided, and the souls after the division are reborn, just like the tail of a gecko. No wonder it can duplicate two complete people who are exactly the same." As he said, Boss Luo shook his head. Yamanlana told me that the people in the pool are divided and belong to the ugly side. They exist as batteries to provide energy for Sun City. Now it seems that the High Priest did not tell Yamanlana the truth. The High Priest narrowed his eyes. Boss Luo said casually, "If it is like what Yamanlana said, naturally there is no way to explain the people in these containers. After all, as far as I can see, Yamanlana, Claudia, there are already 3 of them now. The one who was sleeping in the container, the one who was stabbed in the abdomen by the High Priest, and the one who was commanding the people in the palace to resist the giant beast." You know Claudia?" the High Priest suddenly asked in a deep voice. "We are classmates," the boss said frankly. "Recently, due to personal reasons, I enrolled in Claudia's school. So, I know some things about the High Priest, about you, Professor Siejatu. By the way, the reason why I came to the desert is also because of Claudia's request. She wants to find clues about Professor Siejatu's disappearance from here." The High Priest was silent. Boss Luo waited patiently. The High Priestess let out a sigh of relief. "I never thought that she would come here. It seems that I did something unexpected in the outside world." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "It seems that the souls divided by the Libra also have some flaws." The High Priest said calmly, "After all, they are divided into the good side and the evil side. Their personalities and behaviors are more or less different." "Then what about the High Priest?" Boss Luo asked curiously. "Which one are you?" "I am Siejatu." Boss Luo nodded. "If they leave the temple for too long, outside, the people who are divided from the outside will turn into sand? They can't maintain it for long." The High Priest said helplessly, "Their bodies are created from the sand of the desert here. The implanted souls give them the ability to move. But leaving the temple, actually, if they leave the Libra for too long, their souls won't be able to replenish their power. Their souls will disappear and their bodies will naturally turn into sand." "What a pity." Boss Luo suddenly shook his head. The High Priest frowned and said, "What's a pity?" Boss Luo said, "It seems that the souls divided by the Libra are only one-time consumables. No matter how good the quality is, they can't be stored for a long time. This kind of soul doesn't even have value. However, the ability of the Libra itself is already a priceless treasure." The High Priest said in a deep voice, "The transformation of matter has to follow the law of equivalence. Those giant beasts in the desert." Luochu shook his head and said, "It's actually the ugly side of these people. The folk customs in the City of the Sun are relatively simple. Although there are some residents who have developed bad habits, I don't think their nature is bad. They are kind. But even if they are kind, there is no guarantee that they won't be infected with bad habits. Of course, if someone controls the spread of desire behind the scenes, it will spread very quickly. Just like the snakes in Eden. Pure humans are more susceptible to temptation." The High Priest smiled faintly. "This is an interesting experiment. As for the giant beasts in the desert, their origin is indeed the ugly side of the division. I started 2 experiments at the same time in Sun City, teaching the good people desire, and trying to make the ugly people learn to be grateful. But it was a pity that those with an ugly side would never learn to be grateful. They would even fall into insanity due to the injection of beauty, eventually mutating into giant beasts that only knew how to break. And when kind people were infected with desire, they would also become giant beasts. Different types, different methods, but the same results are obtained." Boss Luo asked curiously, "What is the conclusion of the High Priest?" The High Priest said expressionlessly, "Humans go crazy because of kindness and self-destruct because of desire. Humans, from birth, walk on a path of self-destruction. War, invasion, fighting for love, fighting for family, fighting for the country, competitiveness, dissatisfaction, never-ending pace. In the end, only sadness is left." Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, "Under modern civilization, there have been many happy individuals, and these individuals are small families. But the invasion is still there, it's just that the mode has changed. The high priest mocked. The process of civilization is still barbaric. There are many people who want to redeem it, but there are more humans who don't want to redeem it. Since Eve plucked the apple in Eden, there is only one fate for humans. The fate of humans, Boss Luo thought of Araya, but he didn't intend to refute the high priest's words. Under the entire Araya system, there was indeed only one fate for countless subworlds, unless one of these subworlds could transform into a perfect world. Subworld number 003 where he was at was originally on the path of destruction, but because of him, it was forcefully delayed for a few decades. You can't refute it, right? The high priest's eyes lit up slightly. Because everything I said is happening every day. The world outside is showing a tragedy that makes people helpless all the time. Believe me. Boss Luo glanced at the high priest and sighed. Your Excellency, I don't mean to refute your point of view. I just want to understand your point of view. So, don't do anything unnecessary to me. If you try to disturb me again, the high priest's face suddenly turned pale. His heart was in severe pain, cold sweat dripped down, and his brain felt like it was going to explode at any time. He felt unprecedented weakness, panic and fear. The claws of death seemed to have firmly grasped his heart. But this feeling only lasted for a moment. In a moment, he felt like he was going to collapse. Do you feel better? The high priest nodded with a pale face. There was a hint of respect in his bitter smile. An existence like you has probably never felt the control of fate. Maybe. Boss Luo shook his head and said, My appearance here today is also a kind of fate's arrangement. However, the fate that you can see, know, and believe in is somewhat different from the fate that I can understand. How enviable! The high priest sighed heavily. Just like the black slaves living in Africa, they can never believe in the luxury of the European nobles. What kind of existence are you? God, demon, or a new creature that has surpassed the evolution of human beings? Me? Boss Luo smiled and said, I am me, I only have one identity. Just like you, High Priest, you only have one identity. He was silent for a long time before he said seriously, I need to create the perfect weapon, awaken the remnant soul in the Libra, and completely control the power of the Libra. This is the only way to separate good and evil from the world. The way to make Eden beautiful forever is to make Eve never pluck that apple. But first, I need to make Eden appear. Chapter 1551. The Eden he spoke of naturally had nothing to do with the paradise in mythology. The so-called Eve, the snake, and the apple was just a metaphor. What the high priest wanted to create was a world without pain. The method was very simple, to use the power of the scales to divide the good and evil of all humans, and only keep the good side for the Garden of Eden. Then, no longer spread the seeds of desire to the pure Garden of Eden. Since he had done experiments to spread the seeds of desire, he naturally did experiments to not spread the seeds of desire. The entire Sun City was his huge testing ground. Is there any result? Luochio could not help but ask curiously. The high priest knew what the other party was asking, and at this time, there was a hint of pride on his face that could not be hidden. Faith, crisis, productivity. Well, continue. Boss Luo nodded. At this time, the high priest seemed to have been approved by his boss sitting at the desk, and said with a smile of exultation, The only faith can become a shackle in people's hearts, they will be full of reverence for the gods, so they will not easily be happy with this boundary between humans and gods. Crisis. Crisis is an external factor that ensures the condensation of their faith time and time again. Humans cannot be at ease, but unprecedented crisis can make them completely united. Finally, productivity. The higher the productivity, the easier it is to become a hotbed for the breeding of desire. Sun City? Boss Luo thought for a while and nodded. This is the reason for the strange ecological environment of Sun City. Why do we need to bring out royalty? If only faith is left, shouldn't loyalty be higher? The high priest smiled and said, "After all, this is only a model before the final goal. I need to collect data on the formation of royalty, and try to avoid its appearance before the next experiment. In the next Sun City there will be no more royalty." Luochu said noncommittally, "If only the theocracy is left, the moral requirements for the theocracy can probably be described as just harsh." "This is a long process," the high priest said in a deep voice. The high priest said in a deep voice, "It took tens of thousands of years to create the society we have today. To create another perfect world, it is naturally impossible to do so in a short time. But as long as the method is right, it will come true one day." The correct method. Boss Luo smiled. He wanted to ask who would be the one to decide if this method was correct or wrong, but after some thought, he decided not to say it. "I wonder if the High Priestess has thought of something." "What?" Boss Luo said indifferently. "Your Excellency, have you ever thought about whether the scale in your hand has the ability to divide the good and evil of all humans in the world? The City of the Sun may be able to, but when compared to thousands and tens of thousands of times, does it have enough ability?" "Sure," the High Priest said confidently. "This Sun City was not as big as it is now. In my first experiment, Sun City was only the size of a manor. But with the increase of residents here, the scope of Sun City is constantly expanding. Now, Sun City has a population of more than 200,000 people, which is the current scale." Boss Luo said, "It seems that there is still one thing that you did not lie to the princess, and that is, the people in the pool are indeed used to provide energy to stabilize this space. However, they are not the evil side but the true body." The high priest was silent, but he subconsciously looked at Yamanlana, who was behind him in the shining shackles, and he didn't know if she was alive or dead. "Your Excellency!" Boss Luo called the high priest back and looked at him calmly. "When all of this is realized, please tell me, how can you ensure that, as the creator of all of this, you, who is like a creator in this new world, how can you ensure that you will not develop desires? After all, compared to the long process of self-destruction that occurs after a human develops desire, a creator will self-destruct faster after developing desire, right?" "I am ready." The high priest was silent for a moment, looked at Boss Luo, and said word by word, "I am ready. After this, there will be a just and self-disciplined God." Luochu opened his mouth, then nodded. "I see. I can feel your determination. Your Excellency, may I ask, is there anything I can help you with?" The high priest frowned and said, "You can't help me. The price you have to pay for helping me is to take away the Libra and my materials. After losing these things, I will have nothing. What you can do is to stand by and do nothing." He really considered a lot. For example, he had already thought that even if the world could really divide good and evil through the power of the Libra, could the power of the Libra also divide this strange guy in front of him? If it couldn't be divided, the other party would be an unstable factor in the new world. But he couldn't say this. He was afraid that this strange negotiation would end. Luochu shook his head. "Your Excellency, I can feel your determination, but I don't see what you really want." "I said I can sell you what you really want in exchange for the Libra and these materials in your hands." The high priest shook his head. "I can't resist, at least for now. I don't even have the ability to protect the Libra and these materials. You can take them away at any time. There's no need to say so much to me. But I won't give up the Libra." I said, "Rules are rules." Boss Luo said calmly, "I won't steal your things. I will only trade for whatever you really want, such as resurrection." The high priest's gaze changed slightly. Boss Luo looked at him and said slowly, "A true resurrection, without any flaws, is the original, the one who died in your arms in the war. Your Excellency, your sister, Amino." "How did you know?" The high priest pressed his hands on the table and stood up abruptly. He had never lost his composure like this before. Now, he was like a mortal who had fallen from the altar and lost everything. His face was filled with panic, urgency, and fear. "I will know what I want to know, and also what I should know," Boss Luo said casually. "Just treat it as the intelligence that a merchant should have. After all, the goods we sell are somewhat special." "Amino, my sister," the high priest muttered to himself, as if he had fallen into a state of despair. At this moment, bang! A loud noise, a crazy roar, and an eagle-headed creature appeared. First, the wall broke, then the rocks fell, and then it crashed into the room. The crazy roar echoed in the last secret room. The fleshy wings spread out like webbed claws, and also like the palms of a demon, spreading out to the extreme. Its scarlet eyes, hot air billowed from its nose, and its sharp beak overflowed with saliva. This pharaoh of the kingdom was a mutated creature. In the end, it destroyed everything, broke through all the obstacles set by the high priest, and appeared in front of the high priest. The high priest could not help but frown. He found that the moment the mutated pharaoh appeared, the mysterious young guard who was talking to him had disappeared. Even the chair that he sat on and the table that he used, they all disappeared. It was easy to find the way back to the pharaoh's chamber. After all, she grew up in the palace. After putting on the golden armor, the little maid Elaine found that her physical strength had become unusually good, and it was as if she did not need to use any strength to run. "Lord Lamp God! Lord Lamp God! Lord Lamp God!" Before the person had even run into the main hall, the little maid's voice had already spread into the main hall, echoing. Then, a figure quickly ran up the stairs to the throne, and respectfully knelt down. The red lamp god was sitting on the throne, snoring. At this time, he quietly opened one of his eyes to take a look, then closed it again. "Lord Lamp God, you are amazing!" the little maid said excitedly. I really defeated the giant beast. So amazing!" The red lamp god stretched slowly and yawned. "Humph, it's just a matter of waving my finger, don't make a fuss about nothing." "How about it, have you seen the power of this lamp god?" The little maid quickly nodded and said, Yes, I now believe that Lord Lamp God can bring happiness to the princess. Can you not mention this wish?" "I haven't thought about how to do it yet. Of course." The red lamp god snorted and said, "It's just giving happiness to a mere mortal, it's just a small matter to this lamp god." Humph. "So, how can I make that princess happy? Why does a woman want to be happy? Damn woman. This lamp god hates women the most. Lord Lamp God, what are these?" The little maid Elaine pointed at a pile of things on the floor. These were all things that the lamp god dug out from the walls of the hall, and now they were piled up in a mess. "It's just a bunch of junk. Don't ask about things that have nothing to do with you." The red genie could not tell what those things were. After all, it had been too long since the ancient times, and it could not recognize these things that modern people could recognize at a glance. "Why didn't you stay with your princess? Why did you come back? Lord Lamp God, please destroy the giant beasts that invaded Sun City." The little maid Elaine quickly said, "If the giant beast destroys Sun City, then everyone will die, including the princess." Elaine doesn't want to see this." Looking at the little maid's tearful eyes, the red lamp god suddenly patted his head and lamented, "Do I want you to be happy or the princess to be happy? Lord Genie, I beg you to save Sun City." The red lamp god suddenly jumped up and said fiercely, "Let this lamp god tell you, making your princess happy and saving Sun City are two different things. You can't treat it as one of the conditions for making your princess happy. Use the second wish for this lamp god." "Alright." She didn't even think about it before she nodded and agreed. However, the red genie was not too happy about it. There was no doubt that in order to fulfill the 500 wishes, it needed a summoner who could work well with it. If it missed this little girl again, It really did not know how long it would have to wait for the next summoner. The problem was that the little girl's speed of making wishes was comparable to that bad guy's. She had used up 2 wishes so quickly. What if she made a few more wishes for the 3rd wish? Wouldn't it have to go back to the magic lamp every day? That's not good. This lamp god hasn't had time to guide this little girl to start the plan of making 500 wishes. Wait. The red lamp god coughed twice at this time. As a lamp god who is committed to thinking for the summoner and has ideals and ambitions, I won't let you waste a wish in vain. The little handmaiden blinked and showed a puzzled look. The red lamp god cleared its throat. I've thought about it carefully. Your first wish is to make Her Highness happy. The first step to making her happy is to keep the sadness away from her, right? Now that Sun City is invaded by Ultralisks and is in danger of being destroyed at any time, the princess must be very distressed and helpless. In this case, this lamp god can't make her happy, right? So saving Sun City and making the princess happy don't conflict with each other. They both belong to the scope of the first wish. No problem, Lord Lamp God. The little handmaiden Elaine suddenly put her hands together. You are so kind. The red lamp god opened its mouth but didn't say anything in the end. It's too difficult for me. Then please kill all the Ultralisks outside the city, Lord Lamp God. The little handmaiden jumped up with joy and excitedly held the red lamp god's hand like a puppy wagging its tail. The red lamp god frowned and goosebumps rose all over its body. It waved its hand to shake off the little handmaiden's hand and floated up. Woman, don't touch me. This lamp god hates to be touched by a woman. I'm sorry. The little handmaiden apologized in horror. The red lamp god waved its hand impatiently. Okay, hurry up and send me out so that I can destroy those Ultralisks outside. Also, without my permission, don't make a second wish. After this matter is over, I have something to discuss with you. Send you out? The red lamp god stammered. I can't be too far away from the magic lamp. I have to at least go to the city wall. Otherwise, this lamp god's power will be affected. Oh, this. The little maid nodded and was about to pick up the lamp when she remembered what the red genie had just said. She quickly reached into the collar of her golden armor and pulled out a piece of clothing to cover the lamp. Then, she picked up the lamp and picked it up. You, what are you doing? The red genie screamed. Didn't Lord Genie say that he hates it when women touch him? So, this doesn't count as touching him, right? The little maid replied timidly. Genie. The red genie felt as if there were countless worms wriggling on its body. It said weakly, Hurry up and send me out. This lamp god was actually defiled by a woman. Chapter 1552. Because of the golden armor, the little handmaiden Elaine's physical strength had far surpassed the white-robed guards trained by the temple. It didn't take long for her to move the magic lamp from the pharaoh's bedroom to a place with a broad view. In the palace's watchtower, the little handmaiden held the magic lamp without blushing or panting. As for the red lamp god, it floated lazily beside her. Around her were several palace guards who looked nervous, and their legs couldn't help but tremble. They were responsible for observing the movements of the giant beasts on the watchtower so that they could send messages to the punitive army and other guards at any time. The fear at this moment was naturally because of the red lamp god brought by the little handmaiden. They didn't know and they didn't dare to ask. In fact, the situation was much more serious than they imagined. The black mass of giant beasts had rushed to the city wall. In the past, at this time, the sun god's protection would descend, and the entire Sun City would be protected and blocked out of the enchantment. But now, because it wasn't the longest day of the night, the enchantment wasn't opened. They could only rely on the city wall to resist. It wouldn't last long. The soldiers of the punitive army were fighting bloody battles on the city wall. However, the attack of the giant beasts was unusually fierce. Some smaller giant beasts even jumped over the city wall and mixed into Sun City. Since Her Highness rang the big bell, the residents of Sun City frantically fled and rushed into the shelter of the palace. But there were too many people, too many. Several giant beasts that had climbed into Sun City had bitten countless lives to death. The giant beasts had never invaded Sun City like this. Every time the night was the longest, the giant beasts would always be blocked out of the enchantment by the sun god's protection. Although they had seen the fear and ferocity of the giant beasts with their own eyes, they had never experienced the horror of the giant beasts. Until their bodies were torn apart by the giant beasts and their heads were bitten off. Then, their bodies turned into sand. Sand. The dead people turned into sand in an instant. This made them even more frightened. Why did people turn into sand? It must be the giant beast's sorcery. It was caused by the giant beasts. Giant beasts, horrible giant beasts. I don't want to die, help me, don't come over. Monster! Screams sounded. It wasn't a war, but a one-sided massacre. Lord Lamp God, is it really okay? Maid Elaine looked around worriedly. Through the monocular left behind by the princess, she saw everything that happened in the city. She even saw how people turned into sand after they died. If it wasn't for the fact that the genie was right beside her, the little maid wouldn't have fared any better than the refugees. That's strange. Turning into sand after death? What happened? The red genie didn't care much about the situation in the City of the Sun. Instead, it stared at the little maid curiously. You, what's going on with you? Why would the genie admit this kind of half-truth? Lord Lamp God? The red genie shook its head and made a gesture of looking into the distance. It whistled and said, "There are quite a lot of them. It must have been hard for you to survive in such a dangerous place. These giant beasts are really kind to you. It is reasonable to say that there is no need for so many of them. I am afraid that less than 1/10 of them would be enough to destroy this Sun City several times, right? In the past, we had the protection of a true god," Maid Elaine said discontentedly. "It's just that this time, the giant beasts started to riot before the night was the longest." True god? The red genie sneered disdainfully. "It's hard to say whether they are gods or not. Lord Lamp God, how can you?" Maid Elaine couldn't help but panic. This was completely contrary to what she had been taught since she was a child. "I'll let you see what the power of a god is." The red genie snorted twice at this time, and then its body directly rushed up. Above the palace, a red light suddenly burst out like a scorching sun. The red genie raised its hands at this time, and in the palm of its hands, a hot fireball directly appeared. "I haven't exercised for a long time. I don't want to die too soon, ha ha ha." The red lamp genie waved its hands and threw out the fireballs in its hands. The 2 fireballs were not so much thrown out as they were shot out. They were extremely fast, and almost in the blink of an eye, they were shot out towards the place where the giant beasts gathered outside the city wall. Boom! 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 The falling fireball exploded in an instant. There was only a flash of fire, followed by a huge explosion sound. The giant beast's body was easily blown to pieces at the location of the explosion. "Ha ha ha ha! Comfortable! Comfortable! Comfortable!" The red genie laughed wildly at this time, constantly grabbing burning fireballs with both hands and kept throwing them out of Sun City. Dozens and hundreds of fireballs were like meteorites falling to the ground after falling to the ground, dragging a long burning tail behind them, hitting the ground. Boom! 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 In the red genie's wild laughter, the sound of the explosion was like a tsunami, crazily impacting the hearing of the people. The earth was shaking. The whole Sun City was shaking because of the red genie's attack at this time. On the sentry tower, several palace guards had already sat on the ground in fear at this time. When had they ever seen such a terrible power? Even if it was the protection of a true god, it would only be a gentle barrier, not a destructive attack like this. "Miss Elaine." Who is this?" Genie. The little maid Elaine quickly said. "It was summoned by the divine artifact. That Her Highness gave me. Her Highness! Several guards suddenly gasped and nodded in unison. So that's it. No wonder. Her Highness is the saintess of the temple. This must be a gift from the sun god to help us resist the giant beasts. The little maid blinked her eyes. She really didn't know whether the divine artifact was a gift from the sun god, but this red genie didn't seem to deal with true gods. Was that really the case? After all, she still didn't know the origin of the magic lamp. She would ask in detail later. At this time, the red genie, who didn't know that its credit was inexplicably given to the sun god, was very happy to burn the giant beasts to death. It had been trapped in the magic lamp for too long. Woman, this genie will show you the most brilliant flower of fire in the world. The red genie shouted at this time, and then raised its hands at the same time. A huge fireball began to form in the red genie's hands, and then it rose into the air like the sun, instantly illuminating the entire Sun City within a radius of thousands of meters. Even on the ground, one could feel the heat of this sun. The subjugation soldiers who were fighting bloody battles on the city wall couldn't help but stop at this time. In the city, the people who were rushing into the palace subconsciously stopped and looked up at the bright night sky. The giant beasts seemed to have sensed the danger, and suddenly the commotion escalated. At this moment, the huge sun suddenly exploded. After the explosion, countless small fireballs scattered in all directions. Blazing flowers bloomed in the night sky. Flames burned the earth. They would never forget this doomsday-like scene. Boom, 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 boom. The sound of the explosion lasted for dozens of seconds. It may have taken decades to build Sun City, but it seemed that it only took dozens of seconds to destroy it. When the fireballs stopped raining down from the sky, there was no longer a walking giant beast on the ground. The corpses of these giant beasts were everywhere. Their corpses soon turned into sand little by little like the dead residents. The city of the sun was still bright at this time. That was the light from the flames that were still burning after the explosion. The flames shone on the broken streets and the collapsed city walls. The red genie of the lamp descended on the sentry tower of the palace with a comfortable expression on his face. Anyway, all the giant beasts were really wiped out. The little maid Elaine suddenly shivered, and her face turned red. She excitedly grabbed the red genie's hand and said, "Genie, you are really amazing. Seeing that you sincerely praise this genie, I won't shake you off this time." I said, "Don't touch me. I hate it when women touch me." The red genie snorted coldly. "Heh heh heh." The little maid quickly let go and then said happily, "Her Highness will be very happy. I have to tell her that all the giant beasts have been wiped out. Go, go." The red genie waved his hand disdainfully, but in his heart, he thought that it would be good to meet the princess personally. He wanted to see what kind of person the princess was and what she liked, so that he could fulfill his first wish. Humph, what else does a woman want to be happy? She just wants a man, right? TSK women. The red genie had already planned to catch a man and cast a love spell on him to make him fall in love with the princess. Of course, if the princess already had someone she liked, it would be even easier. The temple. Her Highness said that she was going to find the high priest. Okay. The red genie waved his hand, and a decorative curtain in the corner of the palace flew over. He stepped on the curtain and said, "Come on up, this is faster. Fly, fly." He was flying. I fly. Ah! In the last secret room, the sharp cry of the eagle-headed creature echoed. This cry seemed to have changed qualitatively after this creature saw Yamanlana in the flash of light with her abdomen stained with blood. Not only did it become sharper, but it also became painful, angry, and sad. It suddenly looked at the high priest bitterly. When the red eyes met with the high priest's, the high priest subconsciously took a small step back. He couldn't help but kick the scales of good and evil that was sunk on the floor. To his surprise, the scales of good and evil actually moved because of his touch. At this time, The high priest had no time to think about why the scales could move. He instinctively bent down to pick up the scales. However, a huge force pushed him directly to the wall at this moment. Pharaoh, or the eagle-headed creature that Pharaoh had turned into, grabbed the high priest's neck and pressed him hard against the wall. The result of the collision was that the high priest felt like all the bones in his body were about to break. The scarlet eyes of the eagle-headed creature were still staring at him. "Yamanlana, your daughter isn't dead yet. This is just a body," the high priest said with difficulty. Wake up, come here," with his throat being violently grabbed. Not only did he have difficulty speaking, but he also had difficulty breathing. The sharp and sad cry sounded again. The eagle-headed creature raised his hand directly. His fingers were like sharp thorns, piercing directly into the high priest's chest and abdomen. The high priest's eyes were instantly bloodshot because of this horrible pain. A mouthful of blood gushed out from his throat. The eagle-headed creature suddenly pulled out his hand, then grabbed the high priest's arm and used his body as a hammer, crazily slamming him on the floor. Again and again, again and again. This hard floor was smashed into cracks one after another. Finally, the eagle-headed creature exerted its strength for the last time, smashing the high priest's body into the floor. His body was twisted, as if he had lost the support of his bones. Blood overflowed from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, making him look like mud. After that, the eagle-headed creature jumped in front of Yamanlana. Its hands directly grabbed the light that imprisoned Yamanlana. The light was so hot that when its hands just grabbed it, there was a sizzling sound of burning. It wanted to tear the light apart, but the burning made it suffer great pain, so it screamed miserably. Blood dripped, drop by drop, as if she heard something. Yamanlana's gradually fading consciousness got a trace of clarity. Her vision recovered from the darkness, and she saw blurry blood. Yamanlana raised her head with difficulty. "Don't do this. Do you know, after the next reincarnation, all of this will start again. I will still be Yamanlana, your daughter. What you are doing now is just. As if it didn't hear her, it desperately tore the light with its hands. Finally, a light was finally torn apart, but the eagle-headed creature's body had been burned with thousands of holes by the light. "Give up. You are separated by the power of Tianqing. You can't defeat Tianqing." Yamanlana's voice was sad. "I didn't know you were like this. I used to be so greedy for the outside world, and even thought of never coming back. I even gave the longing for a father to another person, not you. Even so, even though I am so despicable, is it worth it? Its hands tore another light, but there were still dozens of light on Yamanlana's body. But it seemed that it had used up all its strength, and its hands were hanging down weakly. Yamanlana. It raised its head again, and the behemoth was beyond Yamanlana's understanding of the behemoth. It was talking. Suddenly, it grabbed the flash with both hands as if there was an endless amount of power gushing out from its body. This time, it easily tore the flash apart. The light was torn apart one by one, and Yamanlana's body was gradually freed. Your wish. Power, the power to end all of this. Even if you become a monster. Yes, Your Majesty. Chapter 1553. With his ear on the floor, Ivan was listening to something. After a while, he got up and quickly ran back to Otto's side. On the square of the miniature temple, Otto was sorting out the equipment he brought. Most of the metal equipment was stuck to the square because of the strong electromagnetic field. Now that the electromagnetic field had been removed, the equipment could be used again. He brought the equipment with him when he explored the ruins of the Oasis Temple half a year ago. Later, he was trapped in the Sun City and didn't get any supplies. Therefore, the equipment was running out. In this dangerous place, he didn't know how long he would be trapped here. Seeing that the bullets in his hand were about to run out, Otto had to make a desperate decision. He didn't want to be trapped in the Sun City for the rest of his life. His life was so long that he had traveled all over the world. How could he be trapped in this small place? Sir, what are you doing? I'm using the rest of the things to make something more powerful. Ibn naturally didn't know what it was, but he felt that it was very powerful. He nodded and quickly said, "The commotion outside seems to have stopped. I don't know what happened just now. It's like we're surrounded by giant beasts. It's normal that it stopped. I didn't want to cause too much chaos." Otto, the night watcher, said calmly, "It's just releasing a giant beast hiding in the palace. We can still clean up the mess if more people die." Although Otto said that it was easy to kill more people, Ivan felt a chill down his spine. This man was really cold-blooded. At this moment, a night watcher, Otto put his backpack on his back and looked up at the miniature godly temple in front of him. "Ivan, if you can't get out this time, be prepared to stay in this damn place for the rest of your life." "What about you?" Ivan asked subconsciously. Night watcher, Otto didn't answer. He just glanced at Ibn indifferently and suddenly said, "Did you know that you have another name? That is your original name. It's your original name." "What name?" Ivan opened his mouth. "How come I don't know?" "You're called Arya." Night watcher, Otto patted Ibn's shoulder. "Just like now, he is also a guy who values money as much as his life. This Mr. Night Watchman is actually a guy with something wrong with his head." Ibn thought to himself. But at this time, a loud gunshot suddenly rang out in the spacious square. Ibn raised his hand in fright and saw a figure quickly walking into the square. It was Her Royal Highness. The princess stared at Ibn and the night watcher with a sharp gaze and said coldly, "This is an important place in the temple. Who are you people? Why are you here?" The night watcher didn't say anything. He just frowned as if he was thinking about something. Ivan was stunned and he opened his mouth to say, You are the real princess, not the fake one, disguise?" The princess was stunned. She frowned and asked in a low voice, "You've seen her? Her Highness knows about this?" Ibn immediately panicked. He instinctively felt the danger and quickly shook his head. No, I don't know anything." However, the princess fired another shot, and the bullet hit Ivan's feet. He was startled, and his body started to tremble. "Breaking into the temple is a capital offense. I will execute you too in the name of the princess." Hearing the word execution, Ivan became even more panicked. He subconsciously looked at Night Watcher, Otto, but this Night Watcher didn't care at all. He just carried his backpack and walked toward the miniature temple. The princess snorted and was about to shoot again. However, a night watcher, Otto raised his arm and a cold light flashed. The divine weapon in the princess' hand was knocked out of the princess' hand. Flying, a palm-sized throwing knife had actually struck the pistol in his hand with great precision. The princess was shocked by Otto's skills and thought about what to do. However, a night watcher, Otto said calmly, "You don't have the right to execute me. I'm not from Sun City." "Then, even if I am, you don't have the right to execute me. It's not certain whether you are the real princess or not." "What did you say?" The princess frowned. Aotua said as he walked, "You didn't plan to kill us. If you wanted to kill us, you could have aimed at our vital parts at the beginning instead of warning us. There's confusion in your eyes. You're the one who wants to find the answer. That's right. You just want to find answers." Who are you?" "A night watcher," Otto said calmly. "I'm just a lost person who wants to go home. There is someone here who wants to stop me from going back. I plan to kill him." Wait. The princess quickly stopped him. However, night watcher, Otto ignored her and walked into the miniature temple. Ivan stayed where he was and looked at the princess awkwardly. Then, he stood on his tiptoes and sneaked away. From now on, he didn't plan to follow this a night watcher anymore. He didn't see the wealth that a night watcher promised him. Instead, he almost lost his life several times. Stay here for the rest of his life? He grew up here, and there was nothing wrong with staying here for the rest of his life. The outside world was full of temptations. He wanted to go out, but he was also afraid that he would never be able to come back. He always felt that he was a person who didn't want to leave his hometown. He always felt that there were many things that he missed in his hometown. However, in Sun City, he was just an orphan with no family. Stop. One more step, and I will kill you. Bang! The princess, who had picked up the divine weapon, pistol on the ground, fired another shot at Ivan. He was so scared that he quickly raised his hands in horror and said, "Why is it me every time? You follow me in," the princess shouted coldly. Ivan felt that fate was teasing him, but it seemed that he couldn't escape the fate of going in. The flying curtain soon arrived in front of the temple deep in the palace and landed. The little maid jumped down and looked around. Her face was full of doubts. Why is there no one here? The lights are not on. Is it because they escaped? Woman, haven't you been here before? The red lamp god asked casually. The little maid Elaine shook her head. There are rules in the palace. We are not allowed to get close to the temple. There used to be many white-robed guards here, but now no one can be seen. She saw many piles of sand on the ground and couldn't help but think of the people who were bitten to death by the giant beasts and turned into sand. She couldn't help but have a certain guess in her heart, but she felt that this idea was too frightening. She quickly shook her head and threw this thought to the back of her mind. Master Lamp God, what are you doing? The little maid suddenly opened her eyes wide. The red lamp god began to dig the ground. The red lamp god pried open the floor of the temple one by one and pulled something out from the ground. It was something that looked like a long rope. It is here. The red lamp god pulled the rope out from the ground and directly broke it in front of him. Sparks and lightning flashed at the broken part of the rope. The little maid Elaine's face paled, and she quickly hid behind the red genie's back. This thing is everywhere in the underground of Sun City, like a spider web. The red lamp god touched the broken part of the rope with his finger and was directly electrocuted. It's quite comfortable. He put the broken part directly on his shoulder and then whispered in a low voice, "Oh, it can cure this lamp god's shoulder. Not bad, woman, do you want to try?" No, no. The little maid Elaine was scared and shook her head. Master Lamp God, we still need to find the princess. Oh, you are right. The red lamp god nodded and then put down the broken rope in his hand and muttered, "But the power of the electricity is not enough. There seems to be a bigger one underground. I don't know if the effect will be better." Because in its perception, all the thick black threads in the city were ultimately gathered in this temple. And, if it had time, it would take some time to massage and relax. The lamp god once again boarded the flying curtain. When it was about to start again, for some reason, its face suddenly changed slightly. It looked at the temple in front of it in surprise and felt a terrifying aura coming from something. It couldn't feel how strong this aura was. Perhaps it was very weak, not even 1/10 of its own. However, this aura was like looking down from the top of a pyramid, and it was the guy in the middle of the pyramid which made it feel scared and frightened. Here it comes again, this terrifying and strange aura. Master Lamp God, what's wrong with you? The little maid asked curiously, "Why do you look so scared? What are you scared of?" The red lamp god said, "I am the greatest lamp god in the world. Yes, this lamp god is great. There is nothing that can make this lamp god afraid. Sit tight, I am going to speed up. How can I let a woman look down on me? Women! 1, 2, 3. The pharaoh with the head of an eagle and the body of a human was tearing the lights apart faster and faster. Finally, the last two lights that were holding Yamalana's body were also torn apart by the frenzied pharaoh. It held Yamalana, who was bleeding profusely, in its arms. It did not know how to treat Yamalana, so it just covered Yamalana's abdomen with its palm. It did not do anything else, just stood there quietly. But miraculously, Yamalana began to feel that her strength seemed to be recovering, and the pain in her abdomen also disappeared little by little, and even started to heal. But she was still weak, so she needed to lean on the pharaoh to keep herself from falling. "It has been a long time since I was in your arms." Yamalana lowered her head and murmured, "How long has it been since you held me in your arms?" "Since that night." That night, the pharaoh, who was holding the sword of the king, killed his queen with his own hands. Since that night, he did not hold her with his own hands. He said that his hands were no longer worthy of holding his daughter. He was just a sinner. Then, they became estranged, and quarreled every time they met. Since that night, you have become like this. Yamalana's voice was hoarse, and she held the ferocious eagle head in front of her with both hands. "Even so, no matter what, I will help you recover. That is why I went to the outside world." That was why she listened to the high priest's advice and went to the world where God lived to learn the knowledge of God. After that night, the high priest appeared in front of her. "Yamalana, you have to inherit the will of your mother, and like her, find a way to save Sun City in the world where God lived." She became Claudia, the adopted daughter of Professor Siegetu. Every once in a while, she would go back to Sun City and bring back what she learned outside. She kept all her memories. And the other one, the one who was separated by the scale, could only keep one side of her memory every time she acted as a substitute. But now, it seemed that Yamalana did not even know whether she was the real Yamalana or Claudia. Maybe in the process of changing identities again and again in the past 10 years, she was no longer the original herself. Just like the residents of Sun City, just like her father, just like the behind-the-scenes. Yamalana had always been playing with the high priest, serving as the material for him to make weapon. She suddenly felt that the man who fell on the ground, who was as soft as mud, was so terrible, more terrible than the giant beast outside the city. On the ground? Yamalana was shocked. She saw that the high priest, who was supposed to be lying on the ground with all his bones broken, had crawled out and crawled in front of the scales of good and evil. "You!" Yamalana was shocked. She was surprised by the high priest's terrifying perseverance. How strong must his will be to be able to drag this body with no intact bones, and even the chest and abdomen were pierced through? There was a horrible blood stain on the ground. He crawled over, dragging this blood stain with him. The pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body felt Yamalana's movement, so he turned his head, and looked at the high priest who was stretching his hand to the scales of good and evil on the ground, and his eyes flashed. "Yamalana, which one do you think I am?" The high priest showed a smile to Yamalana. The pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body also took action at this time. He spat out a ball of fire directly from his mouth. The moment the fire came, the high priest suddenly roared, grabbed the scale and threw it out. In the furious laughter, the high priest's body was burned into ashes by the fire in an instant. The scale that was thrown out directly hit a container pillar in the distance. In the container, there was a human body that looked exactly like the high priest. In other words, this was the original body before it was separated by the scales of good and evil. The high priest in the cylindrical container. Siegetu suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 1554. The cylindrical container began to slowly open, and white mist spread out from the container. Soon, the floor was covered with a layer of white frost. Siegetu, who was topless, walked out of the container expressionlessly. His eyes were sometimes cloudy and sometimes clear. After a few rapid changes, he finally regained his luster. The pharaoh didn't choose to attack Siegetu, who just woke up from the container. It just showed an alert posture, as if it was facing a powerful enemy. Yamalana didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but she even felt that the pharaoh seemed to be anxious at this time. "I never thought that I would wake up in this way." The voice. After waking up, the voice of Siegetu's original body echoed in the last secret room. It was less indifferent than the voice of the high priest, but it was much colder than the voice of Professor Siegetu, who was Yamalana's adoptive father in the outside world. He picked up the scales of good and evil under his feet and looked at it silently. The pharaoh was more ferocious at this time, but it still didn't do anything. Actually, I have to thank you, Yamanlana. Siegetu. He raised his head and looked at Yamanlana with a smile. If it weren't for you, I don't think I would wake up. You? Yamanlana frowned in confusion. He said indifferently, if I didn't wake up, then it means that there is only one Siegetu in the world. You also had this thought, right? In the process of changing identities so many times, didn't you have doubts about which side of the scale you are? Yamanlana didn't say anything, but her eyes were constantly searching for something. She looked around the last secret room, looking at the containers that were filled with materials. Don't look for it, your original body is not here. Siegetu seemed to have seen through her thoughts and said indifferently. But at this time, Yamanlana showed an expression of, I knew it, then she smiled bitterly and said self-deprecatingly, sure enough, even I am. Siegetu shook his head. The power of the scale can divide people's good and evil. The good side, the ugly side, and ourselves. When we have both good and evil, we are complete. The high priest has never told you about this. That's why you think there are only two sides to the good and the evil. If that's the case, then... Yamanlana took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, where is the original me? Is it okay? Siegetu asked out of the blue. It's called good and evil, but it's more like the materialization of two different personalities. But in the end, it's still a castle in the air without a foundation. It will constantly remind you that you're just a fake. It's better than not knowing that you're fake. Yamanlana took a deep breath, and a determined look appeared in her eyes. At least, I know that you are not the high priestess. Then, I don't have to worry about anything. Siegetu took a deep look at Yamanlana and said, you're really like your mother. Yamanlana said angrily, I won't let you leave with Tianqing. Sun City will exist forever. I will liberate the people in the pool. The real Sun City should be endless like the sun, instead of a group of fake guys who use real people's flesh and blood as nourishment. Yamanlana, are you going to fight against me like your mother? Siegetu sighed softly. I used to love your mother so much, and regarded her as my only family member. Now I've given my love and expectation to you. Roar! Yamanlana didn't attack, but the one who attacked was the pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body. After Siegetu mentioned Yamanlana's mother, the pharaoh's reaction became extremely fierce. It had a very strong power, which was enough to tear apart the flash from Tianqing. Therefore, the moment it attacked, the temperature of the entire secret room suddenly soared. But Siegetu just shook his head, and then reached out to hold the central shaft of Tianqing, and slowly pulled it out. The central shaft was connected to a chain, and at the end of the chain, there was a weight half the size of a palm. It was like a flying hammer. Siegetu raised his hand, and the flying hammer instantly shot out. The hammer as the weight easily hit the belly of the pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body. The extremely strong impact made the pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body scream instantly. Good and evil scale. Siegetu said slowly. It doesn't only have the ability to divide good and evil. At least, in terms of attack, it's not very weak. Of course, the ability to defend is also very strong. As he said, the trays on the left and right sides of the good and evil scale suddenly shot out, and were embedded on Siegetu's left and right shoulders. Starting from his shoulders, golden scales began to appear. Piece by piece, they rapidly flipped down and finally covered his entire body. Finally, on his back, a pair of wings made of golden leaves slowly unfurled. At this moment, Siegetu's glasses turned into a strange green. He waved the flying hammer of Tianqing again, and directly tied up the pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body. Pulling and swinging, the pharaoh with an eagle head and a human body crashed into the surrounding walls, the floor, and the ceiling again and again. It couldn't break free from the shackles of the chains, and could only bear the attacks one-sidedly, and screamed continuously. Don't think that just because you look like Horus you are the real eagle god. Siegetu said indifferently, after all, you are not the real Horus. You are just an eye. And now, you have even dug out the real power of the eye, you can't resist the power of the scale. Bang bang bang! Gunshots. The bullets shot on Siegetu's golden scales, but they didn't even leave a shallow mark. He looked back at Yamlana, who was pointing the gun at him, and sighed. It seems that there are a lot of accidents in this experiment. In this case, I can only redo everything in this experiment, including you, Yamlana. I finally understand why the High Priestess wants to replace you. Yamlana sneered. Everything, including your own dividing surface, is just a material that you can discard at any time. No, he does have the intention to replace me. Siegetu shook his head, but he doesn't hate me. Otherwise, he wouldn't throw the scale to wake me up. Our purpose is always the same, and he has lost the qualification to move forward. He can only give his last hope to me, even if he really wants to replace me. Yamlana didn't care about this. After quickly changing the magazine of the pistol, she pulled the trigger again at Siegetu. But this kind of attack was basically meaningless. It only had the symbolic meaning of resistance. Although it failed, Siegetu stretched out his hand and grabbed Yamlana directly in the air, but as the embryo of the weapon, you are undoubtedly the one with the highest degree of completion so far. Yamlana, your life was given by me, and now it's time for me to take it back. Yamlana couldn't help but raise her neck, as if something was holding her neck and lifting her up. She instantly showed a painful expression of suffocation. Siegetu sighed and turned his palm, and Yamlana flew straight to him. Soon, I will correct your wrong growth this time, and you will have a different feeling soon. The golden chain of the scale suddenly tightened in his hand. Siegetu frowned, but he saw that the pharaoh had stood up again. He couldn't help but stand up, and even held the chain tightly, trying to tear the chain away from his body. You don't have to struggle, Siegetu said softly. In the next reincarnation, I will still make her fall in love with you. Here, I still keep her data. You will still meet like before, fall in love, and finally live happily together, and then give birth to a lovely daughter. The difference is that she won't be confused, nor will she become a giant beast, and you don't have to kill her with your own hands. You won't feel guilty, you will still be the pharaoh of the kingdom, and you will be the happiest man in the world. Believe me, I can give you these, so give up, you can't break free from the power of the scale. Kacha! The pharaoh's body swelled with a blazing aura, and the golden chain of the scale actually broke the pharaoh's body in an instant. The broken pieces of the chain directly shot into the wall. The moment the chain broke, the pharaoh pounced on Siegetu directly. He actually managed to break free. Siegetu looked at this scene in surprise. While he was distracted, his waist was grabbed by the pharaoh, who had an eagle head and a human body, and he was slammed into the wall behind him. At this time, the pharaoh, who was holding Siegetu tightly, roared like a beast. Huh? Siegetu frowned, and no one knew what he was thinking. Because of the protection of the golden scale armor, such a collision didn't hurt him at all, but the pharaoh's abnormality attracted his attention. Vigilance! After the high priest died, the memory of the divided plane automatically returned to the main body, but after all, the high priest's memory over the years was very large, and he couldn't completely digest it all at once. Now, seeing the mutant pharaoh in such a frenzy, the chaotic memory in Siegetu's mind began to quickly correct itself. He instantly swelled his arms and broke free from the pharaoh's tight grip, and kicked the pharaoh away. Who did you give your left eye to? Siegetu's eyes were suddenly filled with a strange light. But the pharaoh didn't care. After it was injured, it became even crazier and pounced on Siegetu again. Siegetu snorted coldly, and the chain on the golden scale flying hammer began to shrink rapidly, and finally turned into a hard long stick. The long stick directly hit the pharaoh's shoulder. Yamanlana even heard the sound of bones breaking. "Father! You're too noisy." At this time, Siejiatu turned around, and as if there was an invisible force in his eyes, it directly hit Yamanlana and sent her flying into the wall. Yamanlana spat out a mouthful of blood, and she only felt dizzy, as if her body suddenly fell apart. Seth Tur, the eagle-headed, human-bodied pharaoh, crawled up once again. At this moment, a white flame was burning on its body. It was not a flame, but the blazing aura released from its body was so intense that it seemed like a flame that had materialized. "Don't call me that name again," Siejiatu shouted in a deep voice, and at the same time, a horrible breath was released with him as the center. What kind of breath was this? Yamanlana couldn't even get up, her whole body was trembling, and her heart was trembling. A sense of fear from the bottom of her heart instantly deprived her of all her strength. God. What was God? You couldn't describe what God was, but when God appeared, you would know that it was a God. Seeing God, you would know it was a kind of natural shock and hint that came from a higher level of evolution of life to a lower level of life. As Claudia, Yamanlana had a lot of experience in learning modern science. She also had a lot of contact with theology, so she could clearly understand the existence of this concept, but she didn't understand why Siejiatu's body had this kind of breath that only God should have. You. Suddenly, Yamanlana's heart was suddenly enlightened, and she said involuntarily, You are not. You are the remnant soul in the Libra. Siejiatu, who was in front of her, let out a sigh of relief. The aura that made Yamanlana tremble all the time seemed to be restrained. He smiled at Yamanlana. "It seems that all these years of training you didn't go to waste. At least in this situation, you can still keep calm. Yamanlana, you are really excellent. I really don't want to delete you, who has grown to this extent. You are not Siejiatu. You are not him." Yamanlana stepped back in fear. The other party didn't admit anything, but what he said was enough to explain everything. At this time, in Siejiatu's body, the thing that really dominated everything was indeed the remnant soul in the Libra. That was the remnant soul that the high priest wanted to build a container to contain in his plan. However, since this remnant soul had already invaded the real Siejiatu, then why did the high priest still, "You? Who are you?" Yamanlana asked in confusion. Siejiatu smiled slightly and said calmly, "Your father, this pharaoh, hasn't he been calling my name?" Yamanlana, a smart person like you still hasn't noticed? Seth. Yamanlana looked at him in disbelief. The god of the desert, the master of death, the old enemy of the sun god. Are you really? Seth?